Hello guys, welcome back to the channel. The Grand Race Guide. I see a lot of guys out there with the ultimate meta guide. I saw some video come by the other day, I think it was from Sidgeway, and I was looking at that video and I'm like, what the hell are you on about, mate? Giving out the wrong information and all that kind of stuff. Now, are there meta cars in there? That is already debatable. I find the word meta car is a bit overused. And not only the word, the cars itself are also overused by a lot of people who see these videos and then think like, oh, this is the best car in the game. There is no such thing as a meta car. You have meta drivers out there, which are really good. In Grand Race, you very often run into them. RCR team, HKR team, Rhino the Raccoon, SimG, Goliath, Core, whatever, you can name all of these names that you probably are familiar with. They are very good drivers. You can put them whatever device in their hand. They will be in the top 5 at least somewhere. So that's already that, right? There are also a lot of people out there who just using the cars that they are using and then don't go anywhere. How many Cento Jetchis you see fly out in Hypercar, you have no idea. This is one of the easiest to drive cars in the game, but they have no settings on it, or they are driving with other devices than the named people that they look the video from or whatever. So yeah, it is all debatable. It's all open for debate. Don't overuse the word meta, and especially don't overuse the cars itself. Or these people are going to use certain cars if they are the so-called sweaties or whatever. If there are 5 or 10 of those in the lobby, they're probably all going to use the same car and they're going to have a fight for the victory amongst the 10 of them. But for the average player out there, Motorfest has a lot of players. I think this month, for instance, in the XP leaderboard, which are the players, we can actually have a look at it quickly to see how many people are playing this game at the moment. For instance, in July 2024, 258,000 people are doing something in this game at some point in this month. Because if you do something in this game, even if it's only like a slalom in the free roam with your friends or whatever, you will have 260,000 people who did something like that, and they get some sort of XP, which means they're on this leaderboard. So cross-platform, PC, PlayStation, Xbox, total of 258,000 people playing this month. Then you have the so-called competitives. They are usually doing Grand Race or Summit or something in that order. Also there you can look at the leaderboard. At this moment in time it's Sunday morning. So probably a bit too early to check this. Actually, you should check it on a Monday or a Tuesday. You're gonna get a pretty good idea on how many people are playing the Summit. 67,000 people at the moment. Now, this is a bit of a special Summit. It's all about bikes. Some people don't like bikes, might not even touch this thing. But if you, for instance, next week there is a car to win in the Summit. If you look at it, I looked at it last week, and on a Tuesday with about an hour to go in the Summit, there were 90,000 people ranked, which means there are 260,000 people playing. This is only like 30-40% of the community which actually plays the Summit. Of course, this is a bit of a cheese fest. They give you vehicles which you are forced to use. The pro settings are locked. So according to the devs, whether you play on a controller, a keyboard, a wheel or whatever, you also have different controllers, PlayStation, Xbox. According to the devs, they give you a car with the pro settings locked, and so that drives the same for all devices, according to the devs, because that's what they give usually one of these events. They give us something like that, which is of course bullshit. If they want to give us green parts in a certain event, I can understand, but at least unlock the pro settings. Because we need some little tweaks here and there. Keyboard compared to a controller, controllers amongst each other might need a little bit of a tweak. An Xbox controller drives a little bit different than a PlayStation controller. Unlock these pro settings. Like for instance, was it last week I think? It was pretty much a little bit of a drag race sorta, with a couple of corners. On the keyboard you could barely make the corners with those cars. just unlock these pro settings that we can give them a bit of camber, that we can actually go through that corner. Because with the camber in the middle, that's what the game gives you. That's another thing they need to change. Anyway, so it's only a certain percentage of the community who is actually playing the summits. Grand Race, probably the same, right? So that's sort of, it's one of the 4 C's, I say. In the Crew 2 you had 3 C's, casuals, cruisers and competitives. And Motorfest you also have the cheesers, which is a 4th category that came into play now. So also that is something, right? People are playing on a controller, some people just play with it, automatic gearbox, other people have the manual gearbox on, or the macro shifting with the 8 shifter and clutch in their settings. If you go to the game settings, for instance, controls, there, this thing here. You're playing a controller and you look at their main controls and they have this thing. They obviously are not using an 8 shifter. An 8 shifter is something, it's a shifter which you can separately buy if you drive on a wheel, sort of like you can buy separately a handbrake. If you don't want to use the pedal shifting, in some cases you have an 8 shifter. Something with like 8 sliders in a way. And that is sort of how they macro that bullshit. So which gives them faster shifting because they're actually pressing the clutch and shift every time, but they macro it on one button, so they only have to press one button and the game will clutch and shift for them, which is obviously faster than normal manual and definitely faster than automatic gearbox. That's already one of these things. Right, next up. Game settings itself, I don't think there's that much. Yeah, probably. Yeah. When it comes to Summit, there are some things. This thing here, right? They put the rewind off and then they can use the reset in events or in Grand Race. This is of course a fault made by the devs in general. When it comes to Summit or Grand Race, this rewind/reset button should be disabled. Now it is only there to be abused. People are pressing resets in certain tracks on Grand Race. People are pressing resets a lot in Summit events because it puts you behind the checkpoint and you're still rolling 50-60 miles an hour. What it should do, it should put you back on track in front of the checkpoint at standstill at 0 kilometers an hour. Then people will not abuse that. But they're gonna try anyway and they will find solutions anyway. So my advice to the devs is Summit, Grand Race, disable the reset. Just make it available for people if they're stuck in free roam when cruising around with their friends. Sure, no problem. Let them use them to put them back in the on the road somewhere. That is all fine. If you're stuck on a rock or something in free roam, I get it. But not in anything which is involving time and competition. One of the reasons why some people do not play the Summit, right? You have the resetting, you have the macro shifting, you have all that bullshit. Then the rewards. What are the rewards even in the Summit? They are usually the Crew 2 stuff. Nitros, underglows, window tints, cars, very often from the Crew 2. As well in the Summit as in the main stage. The rewards are ass, seeing this is a new game. There should always be new cars or new nitros in there. Something that you would play for. Why would you play for something that you already have sitting in your garage? Because also a fault from the devs. They let us convert our cars from the Crew 2 into this game. Transfer them over. We started this game, brand new game in September last year. We started them with 500 cars in our garage. I think that's even worse than the wheel spins in Forza, but it's coming very close though. But yeah, that's what some of these kids want, right? They don't want to put time or effort into it to get anything. They want all their cars immediately from day one available. That's the result of that. Settings in general. Grand Race we are talking about. There we go. This is what I'm using at the moment. Cockpit view is off because if you put that thing on, even if you drive with a wheel or so, it locks the camera inside, which means if you change your camera view, it will not do it. So put it off. You can still get into cockpit view if you want, but it will give you 4 or 5 cameras available that you can go through. Just put that thing off. ABS, I know Forza boys. Just put it on in this game. If you put this thing off, it will just lock up the tires and it will slit up the thing. So just put that thing on. Traction control, you want to have as much grip as possible, especially in Grand Racing. 80% of the time it's either raining or the roads are wet because of some cinematic view that the devs want to bring across in these things. So it's not very often that you have dry races. So especially with rear-wheel drive cars, you're going to have a problem. But in general, you will have a problem because the rain physics in this game are, over time, they become more and more icy, I think. When we were playing Grand Race in the beginning, it wasn't that bad, but now every car is sliding, especially if it's raining. So put this thing on comfort, which means that in your speedometer it will show you TCS plus. I saw some video again the other day, some guy said, oh, put it on sport, and then his car was sliding all over the place and he had no idea why. Well, that's why, my man. Just put this thing on comfort. If you do a drift event, just put it off. But that's only for the drift event. For anything else in the game, my advice would be put it on comfort. ESP is the biggest bullshit ever in this game. Just put it off. If you don't want every car to understeer even more than it already is doing by default, just put this thing off. It doesn't do anything. It's not working what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to make your it's the electronic stability program, so it should make your car more stable, and it doesn't. It does exactly the opposite. It's going all over the place, and just put it off. This is a setting that should not even be in here. Just put it off. Drift assist, the same thing. Your cars will slide a little bit. That's all fine. You know, brake to drift, Need for Speed style. That all work fine. You can put this thing off or on sport if you want to have some fun. But if you want to be fast in a Grand Race or a time attack in the summit, put this thing on comfort. The only thing I change here, if we do have to do a drift event, then I put the traction control off and I put the drift assist on sport. If you put it completely off, you're gonna spin out, especially if you drive on a wheel or so. And then all the rest. Counter steering off, airplane assist, anything with assist, put it off. Stunt assist, you can just leave this at comfort. This thing only plays when you do the Hoonigan playlist event things. And that helps you even get it. If you want to have a bit more grip yourself from it and play around a bit with yourself and counter steer, and it's mainly to go in a circle around these things where you need to hit flags or score points. This thing will help you a lot with it. You can put it on sport, that's fine. Also here, if you put it off, it's just gonna spin out the cars most of the time and you cannot do the circle the whole time. It's what you do with it. I just leave it at comfort. I played that playlist, I've done that playlist. Other than that, this thing is not important. So this is what I think most people out there in Grand Race are playing with, or at least you should be. If you, for instance, saw the ultimate meta guide from Sidway, which I saw come by the other day in a video, he had the drift assist on sport and the traction control also on sport, or even off, I don't know. That's definitely not the way to go. In this game, traction control comfort, ESP off, drift assist comfort. You could potentially go sport here if for drift events, but only for drift events. Other than that, I think that's about it with the settings. These are what most people are using. Is there anything in game settings that I should mention? I don't think so. Unless you don't like to see players' names or something that you can put up here, right? If you're driving around in free roam and those players' names are bothering you, just put them up in the menu here. You can put everything up that you want. Obviously, you don't want to speed. If you're always driving in cockpit view with a wheel, for instance, cruising around, then you can put the speedometer and every other stuff off. Then you don't see this thing on your screen. That is also an option. Emotes, this is also one of those. I would advise you to put them off if you drive a lot of Grand Race, because if a guy in front of you uses his emote, you're gonna see these things pop up left, back, and center, and you don't see the road and you don't know where you're going. Now, personally, I don't have anything with emotes, so I always put them up immediately. And other than that, if you want to get some notifications, you can put these things on or off. Not that important. The emote panel is actually something I would advise you, if you do a lot of Grand Race, put it up. Unless you're one of those guys that want to play around with it, obviously. Difficulty, put it whatever you want. I usually have it on 3. 4 or 5 is giving you more percentage for bonus or money or whatever. But it also, you need to play around with it. In a summit you need to play around with it. Sometimes you need 3, sometimes you need 2 or 1. Not to beat the AI, you will beat the AI anyway. But it's very often on the start they might block you, depending on what you have here. For instance, with the latest playlist, Lowriders versus Dunks, you have 2 of these music events where you have to hit the notes. Put the difficulty on 5, the notes will come faster, it will always come in the same sequence. It's easier to get your 100 note challenge, for instance, where you need a sequence of 100 perfect notes. If you put this on 4 or 5, you get a different sequence. It's actually more difficult because you're gonna get something like left, up, down, right, and things like that. While if you put it on 5, it's gonna come a bit faster, but it's gonna be easier. You're gonna have something like left, right, left, up, down, up, left, right, left, up, down, up. It's sort of like something to remember very quickly. This guidance bullshit, just put it off. Unless you really, anything with auto braking, auto steering, put it off, because then you are not driving the car, then the game is driving the car for you. So if you do put this guidance on, then you can put the race line on if you want to, or only put it on corners only. Then it will show up at the corner where you have to brake sorta. You can put it off the first 2-3 weeks of a game if you're not familiar with the tracks, maybe. Other than that, it's also something which is on your screen, it's in your way, you don't see where you're driving. Once you're familiar with the map, I would immediately put that thing off. But that is of course me personal. I still see, after 10 months, see people driving with this thing on. So they put this thing on and then the racing line on or whatever. Also depends on your difficulty, right? If I need to put the difficulty lower here, and then you probably have to go 1 or so, and then you can put the auto braking on or off. If you go any higher with difficulty, you can't even put the thing on. But nevertheless, my advice would be put this thing just completely off. Play with the difficulty for summit, but other than that, it doesn't matter. The higher you put it, the more money you get. Rewind off, nitro on. Obviously, nitro is one of the most important things in this game because it gives you acceleration very often. And then the rest we just went over. So that's about it. The rest you put on whatever you want. What are we playing on? We're playing on 2K here, as you can see. I don't know, this video might actually be 2K on YouTube, but on Twitch we have to stream on 1080. If you stream on YouTube, you can actually stream on 2K. That is all possible. Audio language, not that important. Well, it depends a bit on how you play. For me, instantly, I put the overall volume a little bit lower and I put my vehicle at 100%. So I can hear my engine. I drive on engine sound in a way. Then you can hear what your engine is doing. Then you know where to brake, where to downshift and all that stuff. But that's also, again, this is a personal thing. And the rest I put a little bit lower. So my main audio is coming from my engine sound. All the music stuff, especially you're streaming and making videos, I would advise you to put some of these things up. What the problem, for instance, with the latest season 4 music, although we have a streamers mode in here somewhere. There it is. You put that thing on, the season 4 music, apparently they forgot to put in the streamers mode, or they don't have the rights, I don't know. If you did anything of the new playlist, you put a video out on YouTube, you had a rights claim. I fought a few of these rights claims, usually within an hour and a half, they got back to you and you actually won the battle, and you can monetize your video again. If you explain that this game has a streamers mode and that the rights are with Ubisoft Ivory Tower, you usually win the battle. But it's always risky to fight the rights claim because you can actually lose monetization on your channel, or even your channel can be closed if you actually are doing it wrong. But there was a new, I don't know, maybe it's solved by now, but it's a bit tricky though. So put it definitely on if you're making videos or streaming on Twitch. But even then, I would not trust the music. If you really don't trust the music, use your own music, which is DMCA free, and put this thing completely off or whatever. That's what I usually do with the radio. Controls is also a big one, of course. I'm playing on keyboard with automatic gearbox, which already changes some of these things. Also of cars, because some cars have a lot of acceleration, some cars have slow acceleration, but those macro shifters, manual shifters in general, you can get away with these slow shifting cars. On an automatic gearbox, not so much. They are just not that good. I will give you a few examples later on, but which are pretty good. If you see some of these controller boys with manual shift, test these cars, they're in the top 5. If I test that same car, I'm thinking for instance on the Lancia 37 in Rally, I don't think it's even in my top 15, top 12 something maybe. If I test that car on a test track, while those guys all in their Google Docs or whatever, they all have it in the top 5 in Rally. So there is a bit of a difference depending on that as well. I'm driving on precise here with the keyboard. So we have the precise setting on, which puts the linearity at 90, it gives you 10 dead zone. You could potentially put it on custom and put it on 100 0, that would actually work as well. The direct mode obviously is off. If I put that on a keyboard, I don't know, the wheels do all kind of crazy stuff. But this is also one of these things. What is the meta? The meta is you put this thing on, or you use a third-party wheel software. Steering wheel mode thing, whatever. And that's what people were using, and that's why they brought this thing in the game to begin with. They were using a third-party wheel mode, which gave them sharper steering and whatnot, and the devs figured that one out, and they're like, oh, you know what, we'll give them some in-game alternative. Instead of just taking care of these guys which are using it, no. This is the ivory tower solution. So they put direct mode into the game, and they put in 2 extra sliders. That was season 3, I think. Sensitivity and dynamic max lock. I'm playing on 80 sensitivity with a max lock of 80. You can put this on 100 if you want. I believe that's what some of the controller guys are doing. On a keyboard this works just fine. I could do 80 or 100 on the road, no problem. But I find if you put the, for instance in off-road, dynamic max lock on 60 would actually work better. So what I did, instead of using 80-80 for the road and 80-60 for the off-road, I just use 80-70. So it's somewhere in the middle. Works fine. You can do 190 as well, whatever. It's a bit too sensitive, I find, if you put it higher, so this is what I'm using. Throttle I haven't touched, this is all default. That works fine. If you play around with the sensitivity and you put it on precise mode here for steering, that works fine. Obviously when I'm playing with the wheel, you have an extra thing over here, which is called wheel controls, and then you change it over there. That also works. So that's what we are playing with, in general, just to play with the keyboard. Precise mode works pretty good, actually. And then obviously you play with whatever device you have. As I said, I play on keyboard. Sometimes people are like, how do you play? Well, pretty simple. W and S are my throttle and brake, and the rest is sort of on the arrow. So I'm driving with 2 hands in a way. Back in the day, in the 80s, 90s or whatever, you had like throttle and brake on WS, and then A and D was for steering. On one hand, you can't be fast with that thing. I'm not used to that. I'm used to playing with the keyboard from time to time or the wheel, but in this game, keyboard works just fine. If you play with a wheel and you want to be fast in the summit or a grand race, you have to put it on 180 degrees. If you need to put your wheel on 180 degrees to be fast, then you know that you're dealing with an arcade game. Then you don't actually need a wheel. You can be equally fast with a keyboard or a controller. In a proper wheel supported game, you can put your wheel on 540 or 320 degrees or whatever. No problem. This game you have these weird jumps. If you put on the angle that you have here, it goes from 90 to 180 to 360, 540, and then it jumps to 720, and so you can't even type in, like, if you want something, let's say you want 300 degrees, you can't type it in, because the game overrides your profiler from the wheel. You can put 300 degrees on your, for instance, your Thrustmaster profiler. You come into the game here, and then you need to put something in there, and it doesn't work. So you're either going to have to use 180 or 360, and then you go out of the game and you check your Thrustmaster profiler, and then it changes to whatever you changed it in the game. It's the only game that does that. In another game, you put that thing on 900 degrees outside, You come into the game and then you change it to whatever you want. You come out of the game, your Thrustmaster profiler is still at 900 degrees. Not with this game. This game changes. So it looks on your computer for the drivers that you have or something, and then overwrites them. It's as simple as that. So yeah, it's in the beginning, if you cruise around with friends, it's fine. You can put your wheel on 360 and just cruise around, but if you want to be fast, you need to put it on 180. Because otherwise you can't be fast in Grand Race or Summit. So it's, yeah. If I need to put a wheel on 180 degrees, then I don't bother connecting the wheel. So lately we are just playing with keyboard and automatic gearbox. So that's pretty much what do I use. W is my throttle, S is my brake, E is my nitro, D and F are lean forward and lean backwards, X is the handbrake, C is the camera, and then the rest is over here on the arrows. Left and right steering and up and down shift, or in case of a plane, we have left and right steering and the yaw or the rudder on the up and down shift. Pretty much. And then we use the numpad to look back and look left and look right in case we have to. Which is sort of all on with the right. So this is all with the right hand, and over here we do everything else with the left hand. Now we have some photo mode things and things like that, but nothing that important. The driving is happening over here. Throttle brake, E is nitro, and then D and F is the lean buttons. So that's all happening on the left hand, and the right hand you use your steering and your shifting. Why do I say shifting? Obviously in drift we drive it, we put the gearbox on sequential, and in drag as well. But in Grand Race or Summit or so, I just drive it automatic. That's sort of what the settings are about, in my case, obviously. If you drive on a controller, then it's direct mode and manual shifting with clutch and macro it. That's the meta device probably at this moment. Other than that, let's have a look on the cars. The meta cars, right. There is no such thing as meta cars, as I mentioned before. You have meta drivers, you have okay drivers, you have decent drivers, you have some random drivers, you have weekend drivers, all kind of drivers in the game. But there are several options that you can use, I find. I posted a video the other day. We won 5 Grand Races in a row. We drove 15 different cars. Every time we picked 3 different cars in 5 lobbies in a row, and we won all 5 of them. That's the other thing, right? If you are in a sweaty lobby, that's not going to happen. If you are in some random kids lobby on a Sunday morning or whatever, you can probably drive whatever you want. You might still be on the podium. And if you drive in a sort of late afternoon, evening session, then you probably have a mix of both of them. Some random guys and some sweaties who are only using metas and actually know how to drive them. Then there are some things. But other than that, let's say an overall average lobby. The random lobby, whether you play in the morning, in the evening, in the afternoon, or at night, you're gonna have some fast drivers, you're gonna have some slower drivers. What can you use, right? Let's start with Demolition Royale. Why we'll start with that? Because it's something we never play. It's very simple. But let's say the devs decide to put these things into a summit. What then? The fastest car I actually don't have. The fastest car is the Fender Charcoal in Demolition. Closely followed by this thing, the Dodge Charger. If you have to do a time attack with these things, yellow nitro cam set with pure and extra pump in a summit, this thing is going to be the fastest thing around. If you have the Charcoal, then it will be the Charcoal. Why do I say if? Well, it was a summit vehicle. It's probably in the shop, and then it will tell me. As you can see, I am missing 10 cars at the moment. It's this thing. The Fender Charcoal is actually the best demolition vehicle out there. It's also the fastest. But I don't have it, I missed it, so I'm waiting on a summit in the Crew 2 when they bring it back, or that they actually bring it back just in the shop or whatever in this game directly, then we can just buy it over here. That is also an option. So if you have that thing, that is the one to use. If they ever put one of these things into the summit, you need to use that thing. If you don't have that thing, like a lot of people probably do, missed the summit or didn't play the Crew 2 to begin with, yeah, then you have a problem there. Then you cannot get that car. In that case, you use this thing. So this is the fastest. If it's an off-road track, you could potentially also use the bulk. That is from the Fenders, because this is a Dutch, all the rest are Fenders, which is a brand created by the Ivory Tower itself. Pretty much vehicles that they didn't have a license for, I guess, and they just call it Fender. Like this is a Chevy truck, but yeah, it's a Fender bulk in this game. This is the best one from the Fenders off-road, and when there is a road, then it is the Firenze. That will be the fastest from the Fender vehicles. But in general, this thing, as well off-road as on the road, will be a little bit faster than both of those. And the same goes for the Charcoal. The Charcoal and the Dodge Charger are pretty similar, but the Charcoal is a few tenths of a second faster on time attack, probably. Something like that. In Demolition Royale, yeah, to get away from the enemies, this is probably also the best. What you potentially could also use is this. This is pretty solid to do something like Demolition Royale. But yeah, as I said, that's not something we played, so at that discipline I don't look very much at, unless we have to use it in the summit. I'm more of a summit grand race player, not any of the other types. Demolition Royale, not my thing. The Police Squad, whenever they bring it, Season 5, not my thing. We will do the playlist. If it's in a playlist, we will play through it, and that's it. Never touch it again after that. So yeah, there are 5 or 6 of them available. So similar happening with the Motocross. Motocross, especially in Season 4, I think there are 3 different tracks, if I'm not mistaken, in Grand Race at the moment. It's very simple. Yamaha or KTM Nighthawk. These 2 bikes have 10 kilometers an hour more top speed than the 4 other bikes. So if you want to use any of these, that's fine, be my guest, but you're gonna lose top speed. There's one track which goes over the beach, you're constantly at top speed almost. You can use these things, but you're gonna get flied by Yamahas and KTMs. These 2 have the same top speed, the Yamaha and the Nighthawk. Nighthawk is a bit stiffer, doesn't steer that great in the hairpin corners. The Yamaha feels lighter. The Nighthawk feels in general heavy and stiff. But it's okay, you can drive both, but I personally find the Yamaha better because it's lighter, it just has a better feeling in driving that thing. That's why I'm using the Yamaha. But top speed wise they both do the same, but this thing I find better in corners. So in general the better bike. There is one track where you have the uphill hairpin sections. That's more like, first of all, slow down enough in the corners. If you drive in automatic, wait till the bike is in second gear and then lean and boost a little bit to go to the next hairpin, and again slow down enough. A lot of people are not slowing down enough in the corners with motocross. Last weekend I think there were like a couple of lobbies. There were quite a lot of motocross last weekend in the grand race. Every time I come on top there I was like a few seconds ahead of the rest. Not because I'm super fast or whatever, just because they do not slow down enough in the corners. So they were hitting walls, they were going too deep into the corner and tap the wall or whatever, losing a lot of speed. Meanwhile I slow down to second gear, lean forward, boost, and off you go out of every corner. And then this thing potentially could be used as well. Although it lacks top speed compared to the Yamaha and the KTM, it has very strong boost. So the Kawasaki is an option, for instance, for that uphill track that is available in Season 4 in Grand Race. Also something which handles pretty okay is the Red Bull Edition KTM. But both of these, any of these 4 vehicles that you see here, they lack top speed compared to the 2 on the left here. So in general I would say Yamaha corner sections, you could potentially use the Kawasaki with a strong boost. If you prefer to drive the Nighthawk from time to time. On the beach or so it's pretty solid, but it's a bit heavy and stiff compared to the Yamaha in my opinion. So I would say over here, use whatever you want. I'm mostly using the Yamaha, from time to time the Kawasaki when I'm doing grand race. That's sort of what I'm explaining here, like what am I using and where do I finish. I'm usually finishing in the top 5. That is my goal if I drive a grand race, try to get into the top 5. And I drive pretty much everything that's in my garage, which are 703 cars out of 713, as you can see. So I'm that word meta that is used out there in all these guides, I find it a bit exaggerated. We have won several races last weekend. As I said, 5 in a row in one of the Sunday afternoon lobbies. I think it was 5-6 p.m. Sunday that I was driving European servers. 5 wins in a row with 15 different cars. So it's all debatable, this meta, right? The meta only comes into play when you have meta drivers, 5 or 6 of them in a grand race in one same lobby. Then you're probably all gonna drive the meta cars, the so-called meta cars. But on the average daily lobby in grand race, there are more vehicles available that you could use. Stop overusing those vehicles. That's going to be the main conclusion of this video. So, motocross. Monster truck, similar. Stop overusing that Silverado, please, out there. It is getting ridiculous. The other day we won a couple of grand race lobbies throughout the weekend, different times, one in the afternoon and ones I played at night, ones I played at evening. The DeLorean DMC-12 is an option. I finished the race, 2 seconds behind me, we were 7 Silverados or whatever behind me, because it's overused, that Silverado. Is it good? Yes. You have to use it with a yellow set, in a summit, in a time attack. Is it the fastest? Yes. Is it the fastest in grand race? Not necessarily. You can keep up with the DeLorean, you can keep up with the Skyline, you can even keep up with the Mustang. All of these monster trucks are pretty much doing the same, and they handle okay as well. Right? Top speed wise, they're okay. Skyline is fine. Mustang is a bit slow acceleration, but other than that, it's fine. On that racetrack there in the forest, in the dirt, DeLorean keeps up with these DeLoreans, with all these Silverados, no problem. It is an option. Very often, I don't know, I can't recall it was a summit or something, so it's like not a special vehicle, you can use it. Don't see many people drive it. Can be used. But yeah, if you go to an average grand race lobby with 28 people, they're all using the Silverado. 15 of the 28 people are in that Silverado. Next to that, you have the orange Camaro. Why is the orange Camaro always... What is it? The Camaro, why you see a lot of orange Camaros in the grand race, that is people who don't have a monster truck. The game loans you a vehicle. In monster truck, that is the Camaro. So every time you see a bunch of orange Camaro in your grand race, those are new players. This is the loan vehicle for monster truck. For motocross, I think it's one of the KTMs. You also see a lot of KTMs sometimes, although they do not have that top speed. So for those people, if you are new to the game, I would advise you, buy the Yamaha, drive that in grand race. Motocross bikes are not that expensive. Do a couple of playlist events or whatever, you have enough money to buy the motocross. But you could in theory use whatever. It's only 30% of the race, right? And they all more or less have the same top speed, so you can keep up with most of them. But if there are some corners, some hairpins, whatnot, then I would say use any of these that I just mentioned. Silverado, Skyline, even the Hub one is okay. DeLorean definitely. The Abarth has the tendency to flip over here or there, but other than that it's pretty good as well actually. Even the Cherokee you can use. Personally, I mostly use the Skyline or the DeLorean or the Hub one. I'm one of those guys, like, I know that the so-called meta car is a Silverado. I'm one of those guys that then probably keeps that thing as much as possible in the garage. I have that in every discipline. You will not very often see me drive the meta, the so-called meta car that you find in all these guides. We are very often winning grand races, so I would not be convinced to drive anything else that I want to drive, you know what I mean? I'm very well aware a bunch of sweaties in there, then everybody switches to the Silverado, which actually makes it boring. seen these things do all the same top speed. Very often you're just in a slipstream train. Another one of those things, overpowered feature in the game is the slipstream. It would already help if they would reduce that with 50%. Because very often it's not even depending on your driving skills. If you're in the slipstream train, then you are gone. If you're like with 5 people up front slipstreaming with the better cars, like let's say the Silverados, 5 Silverados, those guys behind you are gonna have to drive very good to keep up. But that has to do with the fact that these people up front, they know how to drive in slipstream, which is also a skill. How many people I see fly out, especially in corners, because they don't consider the fact that they are in slipstream and actually going faster than they normally would on certain corners, and they just fly out of the slipstream because they have too much speed in the corner. If you're the vehicle behind, play around a little bit with your throttle in the corners, boost a little bit coming out, and you will be back in the slipstream, no problem. But if you follow the guys in front of you full throttle into a corner, you're very often going to fly out. Who knows where you're going to end up? In a field, in one of those brick Forza walls which slow you down like 100 kilometers an hour. Those are things you want to avoid in Grand Race. Is this thing good? Yes, especially with Nitro Chemist set in a summit, but in Grand Race everybody drives with green parts. People are still forgetting that sometimes. You are not using your yellow Nitro Chemist set in a Grand Race. Which means Monster Truck, Grand Race, Silverado, okay, Skyline, okay, DeLorean, okay. And probably a few others that you can use. You will keep up with the pack. All of these things limit out at the same speed, more or less so. Stop overusing that Silverado. It's boring. Drive some other cars. Make the lobby a little bit more interesting. That's my opinion about it. That's for Monster Truck. Powerboat at the moment, it is not in Grand Race, but that might change. Because in November we go to Maui, which is the second island. There might be a Grand Race, let's say we derive 33% on one island, at 33% we switch to another vehicle, it needs to be a boat, could be possible. We go over the water from one island to another, might be a possibility. There will be a bridge connecting both of the islands, so we can get there with cars. But it could also be with a boat or with a plane that they decide to put it in Grand Race. It's possible. At this moment in time, it is not. The problem here with the boats, of course, is overpowered boats. In the Crew 2, we had the Frauscher doing over 400 kilometers an hour. The devs realized that that thing was OP. They tuned it down like hell. It's now doing 335 maximum top speed. Let's say on flat water, and you just lean back, throttle, and boost. Also lean back with boats will give you the most speed. Also something with these boats. The weight distribution is pretty much giving you your top speed. What does that mean? In the Crew 2 we had that bar all the way to the left. That gave us the most top speed on these boats. What have they done in this game, and that goes for many of these sliders, they have switched them up. In the Crew 2 the word rear was on here and the word front was on the right side. Which means they switched these bars up. So if you put you copy your settings from the Crew 2 and you put that bar all the way to the left, your boat is going to go very slow top speed. Put it all the way to the right. Keep an eye on that. They switched the sliders. They did the same with aero and brake balance. The sliders are on the other side now. So you have to go the other way compared to the Crew 2. Do not just copy your settings. That's going to give you the most top speed if you put that bar all the way to the right, and then you can play around with the other settings to your liking. Steering inertia is basically your sensitivity on a boat. Rudder angle is going to give you your angle for steering and things like that. Anyway, we messed around a bit with it, but this boat is completely in the middle of the pack. If you do a time attack, it's somewhere in the middle of the pack. Because it was a bit overpowered in the Crew 2, so they tuned it down big time. The second boat in the Crew 2 was a Vector. The problem here is they didn't tune it down. So this thing is still doing 385 kilometers an hour at top speed, which is 20-30 kilometers an hour more than in any other of these boats. Which means completely OP. Overpowered, big time. The devs forgot about it. 385 this thing does. The Lamborghini is the second one with 365 top speed. So, yeah, and then you have the rest. Then you have the Protos and all that stuff. They are doing about 350, 360, some of them. Not good enough. It's not good enough. The Vector is so... They give it so much more top speed compared to the other boats that none of the other boats are playing. You would say. That's not really true. Boy Smashing. The best boat in Boy Smashing is the slowest of them all. Top speed 310 kilometers an hour, but this thing is actually the best boat for boat smashing. This thing is really fast, but it is so small that half the time you miss a bunch of the boats, which means at the end of the run you might have 6-7 seconds left, and then you can go back for a few of these boys that you missed. But it's not that great for boy smashing. Some people are doing the boy smashing with a plane, that's something else, but in general it is the small narrow boats, the long ones in a word. Blade Runner you can get most points with in boy smashing in general, probably followed by this thing. So they are pretty narrow, but they are pretty long, and that makes them also, when you steer, makes them big and wide, and they will get most of these boys going. But the best handling of those two, from the Offshore 2 is okay, but the Blade Runner is most of the time this is what you're going to see on a summit, boy smashing, top of the leaderboard. Most people will be using this thing. Whenever it's a boat event with time attack and times and such like things, just keep it out of there. This thing limits out at 310, 315 kilometers an hour, something like that. That's 70 kilometers less than the Vector. So yeah, if this thing ever goes to Grand Race, the boating, connecting boat islands, it's gonna be Vector or Lamborghini, because the rest is just too slow. It's all about speed, mostly. Waves might come into play, because you can... Slipstream is a bit difficult with boats, because you're actually getting the water, the wave from the guy in front of you, which might actually slow you down, unless you can ride his wave. So Slipstream skills in a boat is a bit of a different story. You might have to get used to that if they ever bring it into Grand Race. The planes, sort of similar story. Although here the nitro top speed is not that important in a plane. If it would be, then you're gonna end up with something like the Pilatus PC-21, because it's the only plane that can do over 400 kilometers an hour. If you're just flying straight and hit the nitro boost. I'm not talking about Slipstream or falling out of the sky with a nosedive. I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about fly straight, full throttle, that's base top speed, and then hit a nitro. This thing can do, I believe, 407 kilometers an hour. But it's not that important in these time attacks. What is important is the base top speed. If you just fly straight, full throttle, don't use nitro, what is the base top speed? And then we end up with the Mustang having 315 kilometers an hour base top speed. And that's why you always see these things in time attacks. Has decent boost. It can go from 315 to 360 something, which is not anywhere near the Pilatus. It's pretty stiff though, but in general for plane events, time attacks in the summit or something, you're gonna see this Mustang. The Spitfire is the second fastest, and then you have the two of the Grummans available as well. Those are like, if you would do a time attack and you test them all, that's exactly what we did. That is the 4 planes, the big planes, who don't steer that great. That's what you're gonna end up with. And that also means that in a grand race, sometimes the plane event is available. You just take the fastest base top speed plane, which is the Mustang. You could take a Spitfire and keep up with them. What I have noticed is that the new tracks in Season 4, you have plane versus rally rate or plane versus rally. It's equally fast. There is one new track there, which is you do motocross, you go up the hill, and then you can switch between the plane or the rally car. It's equally fast. I had a guy right behind me, he took the plane, I took the car. We arrived on the third discipline, on the 66% switch. We arrived at the same time. Several lobbies in a row, we had cars and plane guys arriving on the third discipline at the same time. So I think for Season 4 what they did is adjust some of these tracks. Added 1 or 2 more checkpoints for the plane so that it equal the times that you use those 33%. Previous seasons you had a plane versus rally or a plane versus rally rate, the plane is faster. Those tracks are still around, at least one of them I think, so yeah, in that case it is the plane. But in the other car you can as well use the car. It's that one lobby where I don't know what the first discipline is, but the second one is rally or plane, and then you end up with a drift at the end. That track is still around, that is one of the previous season tracks. In that case the plane is the fastest. But personally, I don't mind planes, but I just don't like to fly them in Grand Race. I always switch to the car. If it's plane versus Alpha GP, it's Alpha GP anyway, or Hypercar, because those are faster than the plane. In those things, it's mostly the off-road things, rally or rally rate, where people took a plane. Not needed anymore. With that rally track, the rally car is equally fast. You can take the plane, but the car is fine as well. So yeah, the big planes, and if you want to do boy smashing, which has nothing to do with Grand Race, but I just mentioned it, just use something small. You can use the Slick, you can use the Harman, or you can use the Zivco. Zivco has a little bit more top speed than the other two, so it depends a bit, but if you do something like the Bullseyes, a Zivco or a Slick or a Harman will do just fine. If it's low altitude, then we end up again, then it's about speed again. Then you just use the Mustang or potentially the Spitfire, because they have the highest base top speed. That's the planes. And then we have sort of, let's say, done the small categories. No, we haven't. There's also, of course, still drift. Drift is a story on itself in a way. For drift events in general, you can get a good score with pretty much every car in this game. If you go sideways and you score points with slippery bonus on it and whatnot, you can score 800,000, a million points, whatever, all fine. If there are still some leaderboards with 2 million points, there was a double affix glitch at some point, which has now been fixed, but they haven't cleared every single leaderboard yet, so that's where that comes from. In normal, you can't get 2 million points. Usually it's about 800 to a million, depends a bit on the event. Whatever vehicle you want to use, it all works fine. Grand Race is a bit of a different story. It really is a different story. This thing has the highest top speed. It goes somewhere 362, 365 or whatever, but it's also overpowered. It has a lot of power. A lot of people cannot control this car in Grand Race. But 15 to 20 of the 28 people are using this car in Grand Race, which gives you all kind of shenanigans. Easier to handle probably, and also still has some decent power, is something like the Murcielago. If you have a lobby with some overused Mustang drivers who cannot actually keep the power on the ground, you can beat them with the Murcielago. The Agera has decent top speed as well, so I would say for Grand Race, Mustang, Agera, Murcielago. I also see quite a lot, I haven't tested it myself yet, but I see quite a lot of the Hoonigan Mitsubishi Evo 9 as well. So I'm assuming that thing is also pretty okay to go around the Grand Race. Don't see many of, yeah, you see people using other vehicles, but they're finishing somewhere below top 15. So when it comes to Grand Race, I would stick to, I'm usually sticking to, I think I used the 4GT once, but it doesn't have enough power. The other day I used this thing, it's completely hopeless. You can throw it into a corner and then it completely dies out in the corner because it has no power to pull you out of that corner. So I would just leave this thing in the garage, for instance, in a drift lobby. So yeah, I usually go with one of these three. I very rarely drive this thing because I find it's too overpowered. If I drive this thing, I'm usually top 3 of the Grand Race. That's why I avoid it. I rather battle it out for 5th place, or I'm trying to get to the podium, but then I sort of find it more challenging to try to use any of the other cars and beat all these Mustangs instead of using it myself. But that's just, yeah. You will not, as I mentioned before, you will not see me drive the so-called overpowered, like this is the meta car in drift, right? If you see guides on YouTube, oh, this is the meta car. But then I find it interesting to take an Agera and a Murcielago and see how many of those meta users we can actually beat, which usually a lot, because you see a lot of people cannot control these things in the corner and they fly out. So yeah, the other day we beat them all with the Murcielago a couple of times. which was a pretty decent. It was a high-speed track, but even in those corners at high speed, you had to go sideways. It was a bit of a problem for some of these Mustang guys. So I had a bit of a battle, I think, with one guy who could handle the car. Had a bit of a battle with him. Eventually won, just not that far off. 1-2 seconds ahead, but we got it, and then the rest, I don't know. I think that was that lobby where 4 people finished. So to give you an example, right? There were maybe 20 Mustangs in that lobby. It was unreal. But only 4 of them finished. This is one of those overused cars. Is it good? Yes. Is it overpowered? Yes. Which also is a problem for 50% of the lobby, because they can't handle the power. So if you can't handle the power, use something else, right? The Agera is fine, the Murcielago is fine. The Ferrari 458 is also not that bad. It's also an option, and this one is easier to drive. So try out a few cars, you know. Try out a few cars and drive what you like. That's going to be the story of this whole video. Drive what you like in Grand Race. There are just certain cars which don't have the oomph, in this case, to pull you out of corners. Like this thing completely dies out. You can use it if you want to drive it, be my guest, but you're not going to be in the top 5, probably. Maybe it works on manual, but in automatic, no. It's in the wrong gear and it completely dies out every time when you go on the throttle coming out of the corner. This thing also works fine. I've driven this in drift lobbies, I've driven this one, it all works fine. It all works fine. So those are so-called small disciplines, which only have few cars available. Now we're gonna go to some other vehicles. Let me see. Oh yeah, Dragster obviously is not in the Grand Race. Personally, automatic gearbox keyboard. This is my machine. I don't know what's going on with this car. I really don't. I've tested this 100 times. I cannot get any speed out of this vehicle with an automatic gearbox. I do say keyboard automatic gearbox, but obviously for drag we put it on sequential, so we're shifting ourselves, doesn't matter. A speed trap, you go 3rd gear, 4th gear, 5th gear boost. I am getting more speed out of the Stingray than out of this thing. But I also see that in the summit, where all these controller boys with their manual shifting or manual clutch shifting, they're always in that leaderboard with they always use this thing. It makes no sense to me. I have tested it. There are 8 cars faster when I test it than this thing. In a drag event itself, this thing is the worst of all. We have 11 dragsters. This gives you the slowest times. Also there, same story. For me, personally, the Stingray is the fastest in drag events. One of the track with like a bit of width, the Skyline is actually equally fast or even a bit faster because it has 4-wheel drive. So it gets faster off the start for a drag event, but on a speed trap it's not so good. But now we had a drag event recently in the summit, and what are they all using? The Viper. I tried it 100 times, figure of speech, I didn't do 100 events, but maybe 10-15 times I tried this Viper. The Stingray was 1/10 or 2/10 faster every time. With the 3rd gear boost method, obviously. In drag events in the summit, if you quick shift, or perfect shift I should say, whenever the thing is in green, forget about it. It's too slow. You want to do 3rd gear boost and then shift to 4th and 5th. That's going to give you the fastest time. Also something to do with the manual or with the clutch, I don't know. The Viper was on the leaderboard all over the place. I tried it 15 times, I could not get fastest times with that thing. Also there, with keyboard sequential, Stingray. Sometimes we also influence the leaderboard. Like a couple of summits ago, 2-3 summits ago, there was a speed trap in the tunnel where you had to turn. All the regulars showed up with their Hub 1. Then me and GNU and Hotfire used the Stingray, and suddenly everybody was using the Stingray. Because, why? Because we were 1, 2, 3 in that event. Everybody switched that week from the Hub 1 that they're always using to the Stingray. Use whatever you want, I would say. The Stingray is fine. The Skyline is fine. The Viper is fine for drag events. For speed trap, apparently if you drive manual or manual clutch, this is the way to go. I cannot get this thing to work. Keyboard sequential, this is the way to go. Speed trap and drag events, it's the fastest. If you're on a controller, different story. Then it's probably the Hub 1 for the speed traps and the Viper for the drag events, going by the leaderboards that we saw. But this is a bit of a different video. We're not on a controller with macro clutch shifting and whatnot. So that's just like toward the special tanks, right? Planes you see not that much in Grand Race, but it is available. Boats might come when the new islands are arriving. Monster truck, several options available. Stop overusing that Silverado in Grand Race. Really, people. Try something else, you might be surprised. DeLorean, Skyline, work just fine. Demolition, we haven't seen anywhere in Grand Race yet. Good luck for that. Motocross, indeed, this is about top speed. So you're gonna end up with the Yamaha or the Nighthawk. Uphill, Kawasaki. Could work as well. It's not the OP thing, but you could work. If you want to drive something else than the Yamaha, you could use the Kawasaki. You will do just fine. You will be in the top 5 somewhere when you switch to the other disciplines. It's good enough, eh? The rest, you have still 66% to battle it out. Then we just go, let's see, with the rest of the things. Let's start with the off-roaders maybe, and finish with the road vehicles. Rally. Here we have the same thing again. There are some cars which kind of dying out in high gears, 5th gear, 4th gear if you drive on an automatic gearbox. One perfect example of that is this thing. I've seen several tests. I think SimG tested it. I saw the schedule from Militia Gaming. These guys have that thing in top 5. I can't get it into the top 10 even when I drive it on a track. It just dies out. It dies out in 5th gear, it dies out in 4th gear, it goes too quickly to 5th gear, so what probably happens is that the 4th gear is too short and it goes quickly to 5th gear and then it goes into too quickly, which means it's in low RPM and you don't have any power. But these guys are driving that manual, which means they probably on certain tracks keep it longer in 4th gear and then go to 5th and boost, and then it's high RPM and then it goes. If you can get it into the high RPM, it goes. Then I can understand. But if you drive it in automatic, it's not so good. So that is one of those vehicles, for instance. So what am I using in this thing? Very usable in Grand Race. Gonna have a bit of a fight, of course. This thing, it's not that bad in corners. It's pretty good actually. Good acceleration, good grip. The only problem this thing has is the top speed is too low to make it competitive with the other cars. But if you just want to drive something else, have some fun, throw it into corners, sure. Can you get into the top 5? Depending a bit on your lobby, but yes. But you're gonna have a hard time because there are faster things around. This thing, don't see many people drive that. You should try it sometimes. It has a bit of a overpowered boost. Very strong nitro, in other words. Definitely usable. Definitely somewhere in the top 10 in rally. I would actually say, I don't know exactly, let me check. Let me bring my document to the play and see where I have this thing sitting at the moment. One, two, three, four, five, six, 7th place I have it sitting. And as you can see, I have marked some of these things here in blue. And these are these cars which have like slow shifting, so-called granny shifting. If you drive these things in automatic, they're not that great. If you drive them with manual gears, especially with manual clutch, they move up in the ranking. And that's why probably people like Militia Gaming and SimG have this thing, this Rally 37 Lancia way higher than I do. It's like, I think I have it in 12th place or something. The same with the Delta. If you drive this thing manual, the Delta doesn't have that problem in 4th gear, but it has a problem in 5th gear. It shifts just a little bit too quickly to it, and then you have low RPM, and then it takes a while before it goes over 4,000 or 5,000 RPM, and then it goes. So in some of the manual drivers, you see this thing actually equal to the Peugeot, or even in the top 1 automatic, there is a 2-second difference. So a Peugeot over there, time attacks with a yellow set with Nitrochemist pure and extra pump. That's what this is. That's what this result is. We'll have a look in that after I go over the cars here. But this is not the yellow Nitrochemist set with pure and extra pump. This is the Grand Race. So Exige can definitely use. Stratos is also one of those. Doesn't work super great, but the manual guys do pretty okay with it. It's okay also on keyboard, but it's not really. So what you're gonna end up with is any of these cars here that we have sitting up front here. This thing lacks a bit of top speed, but general to drive around with, it's not that bad. You can use it. I see a lot of people, especially new people, drive these things. It is very usable. Top speed is a bit low compared to all the others here, because all the others, they are all doing about 310. The Peugeot, the so-called OP car, it's a bit stiff at times. If you have a few of these things and they're slipstreaming each other, it has strong boost, decent top speed. So yeah, this is definitely something you could use. Also one of these cars, overused in the Grand Race. Like it's the only thing available. The Peugeot is fine. The Renault Maxi 5 is fine. The Lancia Delta S4 is fine. Especially on bumpy tracks. The Mini Cooper Countryman is fine. You can drive all these things in Grand Race. If you know what you're doing, you can keep up with the front. You're somewhere in the top 5. Whether this is the first discipline, the last discipline, or the middle discipline, it doesn't matter. You will keep up. The Porsche 911 GT3, very usable in Grand Race. The Mazda RX-7, it lacks a bit of oomph, but if you use this in manual, for sure, this is another one of these. It was a bit overpowered in the Crew 2, they tuned it down, that's for sure. But even on my leaderboard, with the test that I did, it is in 4th place. For me, time attack, yellow set, Peugeot is 1, the Delta S4 is 2, Maxi Renault is 3, and the Mazda is number 4 in the yellow set time attack. But that also means that you can use it in Grand Race in general. But it's less powerful because it has strong nitro. Yellow Nitrochemist set, that's where it gets its advantage, getting some extra power from it. In Grand Race you are driving with green parts, which makes it less powerful. So in Grand Race, certain tracks you can use it, wouldn't use it on all tracks though. The Porsche, definitely you can use it in Grand Race, for me personally. There is also a big difference between the Delta S4 and the Delta S4 Hoodlum Racing thing. This is some summiting that they gave us, but it comes with a body kit. You cannot customize it, you can't take that kit off, which makes it way stiffer and heavier feeling driving wise, that it actually drops. I don't even know where I have it. Somewhere in the 10th position I think, if I do the time attack with this thing. So putting this like, oh, the Delta S4 is 2nd and this thing is then 3rd? No, not for me. There is a big difference between those two. It's like 1-2 seconds difference between those two vehicles if you drive them on automatic gearbox. Maybe it works on manual, that they are pretty similar. For me, they are not. For me, the normal Delta S4 is way better than that Hoodlum thing. So yeah, what am I driving in Grand Race? Exactly what you see here. The Citroën, the Renault, the Lancia, the Mini Cooper, sometimes this thing, the Porsche I'm using. I am definitely using the Exige from time to time. We're fighting for the top 5. We are very often on the podium. When I say I drive these things, this is where we ended up with these things, right? It's not like when I drive it and I finish in 12th position or so. No, we're fighting for a podium with the cars that I'm mentioning here. So again, this is also one of these disciplines. You want to use the Peugeot, fine, but stop overusing it. Every rally lobby, people are driving the same car. While there you have, like, in this discipline, you have 7-8 cars which are very viable to use in a Grand Race. That's going to be eventually the conclusion of this video. When you do Grand Race, use what you like. There are a few things that you want to stay away from, obviously. Something like this thing, this is a meme car. Even in a summit, it's like the slowest of the slowest. It's not even funny. It's like, I think it's 15 seconds slower than a Peugeot or something. and even 5 seconds slower than whatever just comes above there in the ranking. This is a meme car. We also have some broken things. This thing is completely broken. Most of those things that I just said there, they're limiting out, like there is this season, there is a highway track. They make you switch to rally, and then it's all highway. There's not one single inch of dirt on that whole track, it's all highway. So the Peugeot, the Lancia, all these things, they're doing 313, 312, 330 kilometers an hour top speed. That's what you want to use there. But there are some exceptions. I don't know how these things, I haven't tested them yet, but this, with a yellow set and you boost full speed, this thing does 322 kilometers an hour. This one, basically the 1969 cars, both of them are doing 320 kilometers an hour, which is 10 kilometers more than the Peugeot and the Lancia and all that stuff. I don't know if it's exactly the same in the Grand Race, but it should have a little bit more top speed. And on the highway track, the handling, of course, with these cars, if you're doing it with the yellow set in a time attack, it's not that great. But top speed wise, they are pretty good. But if you do it in a time attack, they are somewhere down the bottom of the rally cars because they are too heavy to throw around or whatever. This is kind of okay, but this one is too heavy to throw around the corners. This thing is completely broken with the yellow set. And when I say completely broken, I mean completely broken. This thing does 351 kilometers an hour if you hit the boost in 4th gear. It only has 4 gears. You're going on the highway, you hit the boost. This thing does 351 kilometers an hour. That's 40 kilometers more than Peugeot, for instance. So there is something broken with the nitro with a yellow set on this car, which pretty much means what I think it's broken is the limiter. It doesn't limit out. So it goes deep into the red zone of your RPM meter and it keeps going. It's some sort of, sort of similar like a clutch bug in the Crew 1, remember that? And I'm not talking about driving with a clutch, we're driving an automatic gearbox here, but you press that thing and then it just kept going. This is the same, it keeps going till eventually it limits out at somewhere 350 plus. But if you drive it in a Grand Race with green parts, then it limits out at 315, I think. But if you have a fast downhill section where, let's say in a summit time attack, this might actually be the one that you're going to use in the summit time attack. If it's like, there's one rally race track which pretty much goes, the Descent I think it's called, it goes like top speed wise downhill. This is the thing to use because it does 40 kilometers an hour than any of the other rally cars. I know it's an off-road rally raid event that I just named now, but that's the kind of stuff they do in the summit, right? They give you a rally car and they want you to drive that thing there. Then you end up with that thing. But for Grand Race itself, as I mentioned, pretty much you're looking at these 5, 6, 7 cars here, plus the Porsche, plus the Lotus XGs, all possible. That's for rally. So also here in this discipline, stop overusing this Peugeot. Drive something else from time to time. Be a bit adventurous. Yeah. Definitely, please for the God's sake, drive something else than the BMW Z4 in rally raid. The so-called meta car. It is so overused and it's not even, in my opinion, it's not even meta. I know it has strong boosts and with the manual shifters they can fly that thing around. It's pretty good uphill and whatnot. This thing we are talking about, but it's overused. It is overused in Grand Race, 100%. It has strong NOS, it has good acceleration. Is it good top speed? Yes. Is it the best top speed? No, not at all. The highest top speed in rally raid is actually a bike. 279 kilometers an hour this thing does, but it bounces around a little bit if you actually use it. Can you use a bike in rally raid? Yes, you can. The BMW 1200 Adventure keeps up with most of these cars. If you're plowing through the fields, this thing does 365 kilometers an hour, which is good enough to keep up in Slipstream with some of the cars, and you have more acceleration. Very often you're actually leading the pack at the start once you are in this bike. So this is a bike which you can use, as long as there are not too many hairpins, because obviously steering becomes a problem. But you have these grand races where you fly through the fields and take a few jumps here and there. This thing is usable. BMW, as I said, strong acceleration, strong NOS, top speed, somewhere around 272 kilometers an hour. This thing, pretty good as well. Automatic, it's not so great. It's also a bit stiff and heavy, but for the manual boys, you see them often driving this. This thing, 276 kilometers an hour, 4 kilometers more than the BMW Z4. This thing doesn't handle that great. Top speed 277 kilometers an hour, which is the most of the cars. But it doesn't handle that great. But there is another car which also can do 277 kilometers an hour, which is way better and very often can beat the Z4s. We'll come to that in a second. Also very usable in Grand Race, Volkswagen Touareg. Certain tracks it works just fine. Another one that you can use, the Jeep Wrangler Evo 2, works just fine. Personally, I find them a bit stiff and heavy. I do use the Touareg at some, especially if it's like muddy or something, on that track where you go some zigzag, then you have a few jumps in there, in the forest area, dirt area. This thing has traction the whole time. It's pretty good on that track. You can keep up and even beat some of the Z4s. I do say some of them, it always, as I said, there are no meta cars, in my opinion, there are meta drivers. If you have a fast driver in a Z4, he will beat you. But if you have a slower driver in a Z4, you easily beat him with this. And if it's a bit balanced out, skill-wise, you can keep up with the Z4s on certain tracks with this thing. So it's usable. This one is usable, but on keyboard automatic, not so much. I don't know. I don't like it that much. But that might change. I still have to do the rally rate for my test document, so I still have to tune them as well. So it might be a bit of a stiff tuning we can adjust. This thing is not that bad, but also not that great, and that's why they probably give it to you if you're a new player. This, I believe, is the loaner vehicle in rally rate. In rally, it's the Ford Focus. The Ford Focus does 317 kilometers an hour, the 2010 Focus, which is actually more than the Peugeot and whatnot. So in rally, that Ford Focus, if you can control it a little bit, is actually not that bad as a loaner vehicle. This thing, not that great. It's a bit heavy, it bounces around a bit, but yeah, that is what you get as a new player. So you're gonna have to use that until you have a better one available for you. So what are we using when we are driving Grand Race? Any of what you see here. Porsche 959 is pretty good overall. Definitely on certain tracks it can beat the Z4s easily because it's just better on those tracks. So that is definitely something you can use. This thing does 270 kilometers an hour, I think, 271, so it's like 1 or 2 kilometers an hour slower than the Z4. It's way more stable. I find in general the Z4, it bounces around a little bit too much to my liking. This thing is way more stable, keeps up with it. One of the choices that you can beat them with is the Skyline. So, yep. So we have the Porsche, we have the Skyline. This is the other vehicle, which can do 277 kilometers an hour, which is 5 kilometers an hour more than the Z4. Definitely usable, especially in the volcano area. This thing works just fine. People slightly starting to figure it out, I think, because you see them more and more in Grand Race now. So people were probably so bored driving that Z4 that they're using for alternatives, and they have finally figured out this one actually has more top speed than the Z4. All these biggie bounce bumpy tracks of volcano area, this thing is pretty good. It has one big downside, it's not great in water. So on the river track, don't use this thing because it dies out pretty quickly in the water. But other than that, if there's no water involved, this thing you can take whenever you want. You keep up with the Z4s, you give them a fight with it. Personally, I find it better than the Z4. Certain conditions it might not be, but this thing also, not many people you see drive this thing. This thing is not bad. I've driven it several times in Grand Race, been in the top 3 with it several times. This is another usable car in Grand Race. No problem at all. The bike we already mentioned, you can keep up with the cars. This is probably a bike you can definitely use. I'm not a fan of the Ducati Monster, although it has the highest top speed. bounces around a bit too much. This is more stable. It's a bit heavier, which makes it more stable on these bouncy field things. No problem. Here, another one of those. 276 kilometers an hour, which is 1 kilometer an hour less. Sort of similar as the Tacoma. It's a little bit less than the Aerial Nomad, and it's also higher top speed than the Z4. Also this one, bouncy tracks, pretty good, pretty stable, doesn't move that much as the Z4, very usable. Z4, of course, if you need to use it, be my guest, but don't overuse it. This is probably more than the Peugeot in rally. This is overused in rally raid, that is 100% sure. There are way too many people driving this thing and then look surprised that you beat them with something like an Aerial or even the Jeep Moab on some tracks or whatever, right? So what am I using? Exactly that. The Porsche, the Nissan Skyline, the Aerial Nomad, the Cherokee from time to time. When I feel like it, the bike. I'm using the Jeep Moab at some times. Very rarely I use the Z4 or the Tacoma because I rather beat them with something else than driving that thing. That's sort of how I look at that. I don't know. I don't know what the Tacoma thing is. I don't know. I don't get it. Automatic keyboard feels heavy. It's fast. Yeah, I get it, but I think it's a manual thing. Probably good power, nitro power with the shifting down and shifting up the whole time. Automatic gearbox. It's very often looking for gears. It's in the wrong gear. I don't like it very much. I use it from time to time, but not much. Not much at all. In general, you will see me drive any of these cars. Porsche, Skyline, Nomad. From time to time. The other day we won a lobby in the Cherokee, so I mean, and the lobby was full of Z4s. All usable. You sort of slightly get the idea, I guess. The so-called meta cars are not meta in any random Grand Race lobbies, as there are many around during the day. Some of them you might have a problem if you're up against the sweaties who are driving all that same Z4, slipstreaming each other, but it doesn't matter what you drive. You're gonna have a problem to those people anyway because they are meta drivers, not meta cars. We come back to that point many times already. So all usable. I already with rally rate here like what 10 cars that I showed you, which are very usable and you can keep up with them. So that's already off-road vehicles done. So then we end up with the road cars. Let's start with the slowest ones, I guess. Street Tier 1. Same story here again. Same story here again. Stop overusing that purple thing over here, in my case. The Porsche RS 2.7. Is it good? Yes, it's good. It is the highway king, for sure. It's the only vehicle which can do 330 kilometers an hour plus. Slipstream 333, I think it does. If you have a couple of those Porsches, especially in Season 4 around, they are slipstreaming each other, then you are toast. If you're not in a Porsche and you are not in that pack, you are toast. There's nothing that can follow it. If you have a bunch of them. If you only have one or two of them in that track, you can keep up. And then you're gonna have to catch up in the other two disciplines, but you can keep up. It's not like they're driving 20 seconds away from you. But if you have 4 or 5 of those slipstreaming each other to death on the highway at 333 kilometers an hour, then you might be 5 or 8 seconds behind something in that region when you switch to the second discipline, which means, yeah, that's a bit of a problem. The problem, of course, there is the devs have put way too many highway speed things in this Season 4. So there is that one highway track where it's Street Tier 1 and then some other 2 disciplines, also pretty Street Tier 1 rally rate and then racing, I think. It's all pretty high speed. So and then there's another one which is even worse, which is Hypercar Street Tier 2 and racing. That is all highway. We'll come back to that one later. So is this thing good? Yes. But if there are many corners, are there better things? In my opinion, yes. This one, for instance. Don't see it many times in the Grand Race used. I don't know why. I find it pretty good. It does, with Nitro, testing it yourself, it does 320 kilometers an hour. In Slipstream in Grand Race, it does 322 to 324. Which is a little bit less, but it's almost the same as the overused Audi RS2. This thing is pretty heavy and stiff, but it's good. It can do 325 in Slipstream, something like that, but that's what it is, right? You can use that Toyota and you can use the Audi RS2, and those two can keep up with each other, and you're slipstreaming behind the Porsches. That is just a thing on the highway. But if I have to choose, like let's say on a twisty track, any of these three, I'm gonna end up with that Toyota. It's a little bit less top speed, the acceleration is a bit slower, but it corners pretty good, and it's definitely something that you can use. You're driving for 33% in a street tier 1, sure, you're somewhere in the top 5 with this thing, and then you switch to another discipline, and then either you're ahead and they have to catch up, or you catch up with whatever is in front of you. It's not like the Porsches are gonna drive away from you. The Porsches only drive away from you if there is high speed involved. This thing can keep up with the Porsche, no problem. Audi RS2, if you know, if you have some decent settings and you know how to handle it, it keeps up with it. Something like the Mazda RX-7 Sakura, whether you take the normal one or the Sakura edition, fine, it's drivable. This thing, stop using this thing. Stop overusing this thing. This thing is, I think they only use it for one reason, and that thing is, it's 1500 kilograms. It's pretty heavy, it's very hard to side by side, and they move a little bit, you fly off with something like this here. Also very good, by the way, the Lancia Stratos. But it's pretty light, it's less than 1000 kilograms, so it's like 800-900 kilograms. The Audis are 1500 kilograms, they push you a bit outside. That's why I think that a lot of kids are using this thing, so they can push you a little bit of a side. But we also have a solution for that, we'll come to that in a second. So this thing, stop overusing it. I see, it's good, it's decent, it has decent top, but it's decent, it's just decent. There are many other cars which are better. I think this is people who misread a guide or misinterpreted it and heard like, oh, Audi, you need an Audi in Street Tier 1, and they take this one. It's okay, but this one is better. So I think they're just taking the wrong Audi or something, I don't know. Or they're sliding too much with this, because this thing understeers a little bit, slides a bit too much, it does a bit of everything. Understeer and oversteer, but if you make some pro settings on it, this thing is pretty good. So definitely something you can use, but there are other options. As I said, this one for instance is pretty good. It's a bit slow in top speed in general, but other than that, it corners pretty well, brakes are good, handling is good, it's stable. Probably one of the most stable ones, but I drove that for a while from time to time, but now lately I'm driving the Toyota. For me, this is probably the best Street Tier 1 car, if it's not a highway track. If it's a highway track, you have to go with this, especially if there are some people in the lobby that you know, if you do a lot of grand racing, you sort of know like what you have, what you're dealing with in your lobby. If you do a couple of races and you're all in that same lobby, race after race, then you know what you're dealing with. There are a bunch of good drivers in there, the meta drivers, whatever. Then yeah, you know that they are using this car, then you have to go as well, or you are not on the picture. So then you can keep up with them on the highway. Everybody doing 333 kilometers an hour, boring as hell, but you have to, because otherwise they are too far away to most of the time to catch up. But if it's not a highway track, you can use the Audi RS2, any of the Mazda RX-7s, it's fine. This thing, you can use it, but it's a bit slow in general, I find, and also overused, definitely overused. Let's see. This thing, also pretty good. Don't see many of them driving around a bit. Limits out at 315, which is not that far off of things like the Audi or the Toyota. You can definitely use this one, pretty good. This one, no problem, use it. You will be somewhere in the top 5 whenever the Street Tier 1 is finished and you switch to another discipline or finish at the end, you can use it. Pretty okay. There are many other options. We'll probably find something else. Yeah, like I said, the Mazda RX-7 Turbo is fine. I'm usually, if I do use it, I use the Sakura edition because it's earlier in my list. That's the first one that I see, but you can also use this one, the normal one, no problem. Yeah, this is unfortunately for you guys out there, if you're new, This is the lone vehicle. Why is this car in the game? Probably because Fergus, CEO of Ivory Tower, was driving one of these at some point and then needed to be in the game. So that's basically Fergus's car that has been put into the game, and that is probably also why that is the loaner car in Street Tier 1, but it goes all over the place. People can't take corners with it, it's not that great braking, not that great steering, so again, if you're a new player, just buy something else that you don't have to drive this thing in Grand Race the whole time, because this is the loaner vehicle in Street Tier 1. This thing also very usable, pretty okay. This thing also not that bad, you can use that one as well. This one, pretty good. Pretty good in Street Tier 1. This one, pretty good in Street Tier 1. It's a bit slow acceleration, but other than that, handling is pretty okay. Surprisingly for a big muscle, but it actually works pretty good. So yeah, again here we're already on 7-8 cars that I looked at. There are probably some others. Just quickly scrolling through it. Yeah, if you want to have some field day, you can use something like this or the other limo. Actually, it's not that bad, but if you don't mess around with it, put some decent settings on it, it's actually not that bad. But of course, you're going to be a target because they're like, oh, a limo, let's hit him. And yeah, but you can potentially control this and make this thing work. Ford Focus, that was the so-called meta, or another one of those, the so-called meta in Season 1 and Season 2. From time to time, you see it less and less now. So people have figured out meanwhile that it's not the super OP car anymore. But it's still decent, of course. It still does 320 kilometers an hour. It accelerates fine, brakes are fine, handling is fine. So it's definitely something you can use. The Lancia Stratos you can use. The Toyota I find personally one of the better ones, if not the best. Just for cornering and such. Of course, top speed wise, then you end up with the Carrera, but other than that, I'd rather use the Toyota than the Audi, personally, for instance. And then we have this thing. This is what I call the anti-Audi car. You have all these kids trying to push you up the road with either their Audi RS2, which is probably used for that reason, other than the fact that it's pretty good. This thing is definitely overused because it's okay, but it's not like I already mentioned 7-8 cars which are better. But they can push you around a little bit with this thing, with this 1500 kilograms. And that is until you take this thing. If Street Tier 1 is the first discipline, and you look around and you see a lot of people using one of these Audis in that lobby, take out this thing. This thing has decent acceleration, it has decent top speed, it does also something like 320, 318, 320, sort of similar as the Toyota and the Audi RS2. And this thing does not move at all. These Audi guys, these kids with their RS3, they can push you around as much as they want. This thing does not move. And you can keep up with the front as well because it's good enough. This thing is something I find, if Street Tier 1 is the first discipline, I very often use it at the start. Because there are a lot of chaos happening, especially on the coastal roads. Either going from Cayena Point to the harbor or from Cayena Point to, let's say, Turtle Rock. This thing is very usable and people with their Audis cannot push you around. That's why I call it the anti-Audi. All these RS2 and RS3 guys who try to run you off the road, good luck. They're gonna try to hit you, they bounce off this car and they're in the grass. This thing does not move and you just keep going. And it's bye-bye, see you later alligator. So yeah, I'm using this, obviously. I'm using very rarely the Ford Focus actually. I'm definitely using the Cherokee, I'm using the Stratos, I'm using the Toyota GR lately quite a lot. Very rarely, only on the highway track I use this thing, otherwise I don't touch it. Audi RS2, sure, from time to time. Sakura Edition, sure. And then some others that I mentioned, like the Honda Integra and the Nissan 240 SX, also often using them. Again, also in Street Tier 1, I'm using like 8-10 different cars very often, and then from time to time I take something else like a BMW M2 or whatever. Just have some fun with it, right? Those are all cars, even like a BMW M2, you can get top 5 with that. In the 33% Street Tier 1. You always have to look at discipline by discipline, right? So also this one you can use it if you want to, but at least put some settings on it that you don't go all over the way. Very often you get pushed by these guys. If you get that a few lobbies in a row, take out the Cherokee and deal with them. Don't need to ram them, just stay on the road. They will ram you and they will fly off because that thing does not bounce. So the Cherokee is what I call the anti-Audi vehicle. Also here, Street Tier 1, I'm using 10-12 different cars very often, and then from time to time even something else. Also the street cars I still need to test, so I might come up with something else whenever we tested all the Street Tier cars. Because there are, I think at the moment, 134 Street Tier 1 cars. So you can probably use 20-25 of them and do pretty okay with it in Street Tier 1 in Grand Race. Okay, switching one category higher. Street Tier 2. This thing, it's the here we come again, the highway speed king, this one. The only reason it's there is because it's the only thing which does about 400 kilometers an hour. The rest doesn't get there. Other than that, it's okay, it's not super. For a lot of corners involved, great. What does it mean? This is one of those cars which benefits from the changes on Season 4, where they gave all cars a little bit more grip, especially four-wheel drive cars are benefiting from that. Which makes it actually a little bit better for cornering here and there, but it's the highway king, that is about it. Other than that, I would not even use it. It's the same as with the Porsche. It's a highway, you need this thing. If there are not too many, if you look around in your lobby, there are not too many, then I don't even take it on the highway. It's the only thing that does 400 kilometers an hour, that's pretty much also the only thing that I use it for. Other than that, you can use it, it's decent overall, but there are okay things or things where you can go faster with. Also overused here. This thing, 386 kilometers an hour top speed, not that great. This thing limps from the nitro. You're pretty much a bit too slow in the corners with it. It corners pretty okay. It grips the gutters pretty okay. But usually there are some things which turning faster or whatever, and then you do a little boost, and that's where it gets its power from. It's very strong boost acceleration thing. Come out of a corner, you tap the booster like 1 or 2 times, and you're back up with whatever is in front of you. So it's a nitro thing. It's okay, but it's so-called OP car again, according to someone. The same with this thing. Same thing. Limits out at 386 kilometers an hour. It's very good overall, handling, braking, whatnot. Also overused. Every race again, every lobby in Street Tier 2, you see a bunch of these F40s show up. There are certain tracks where it is overall the better car in general, but not on all of them. So yeah, what are we using here? Alternatives. As always, I don't like to use the meta cars if I don't have to. The so-called meta cars, right? For me, there are no meta cars, there are meta drivers out there, and that's it. And they drive any of these 10-15 cars that I mentioned in every of these bigger disciplines. Like in this case, I think we're at 193 at the moment for Street Tier 2 vehicles available in the game, and then you see people using F40 all day long. This is, and then you beat them, and then like, huh? Because like I said, it's good, but it's not always the best option. So yeah, the 911. The last 3 weeks I've done a lot of grand races before I did this video to figure out what's going on and what I like to drive and where do I end up with these vehicles. Are they actually usable? If I'm on the podium with any of these vehicles, then for me they are usable in a grand race. And that's the cars that I'm mentioning. These are all cars that I'm mentioning where I got wins or podiums with it very often. I think I used this thing 5 times in the last 3 weeks. And I was not convinced about it. It has overpowered NOS, but that's about it. The same with the F40. I don't think I used once in the last 3 weeks. A lot of people around me did, but some beat me. Again, it comes down to the meta drivers, right? Some of them have beaten me, but not that many. We also beaten a lot of them. So it's overused again, or used by the wrong people. I don't know what it is, but stop overusing these so-called meta cars. This F40 is not the only thing which is good in Street Tier 2. Again, if you have a lobby with 5-6 meta guys who are all driving that F40, that's fine, but you will not be fighting with them. because they are the meta drivers, not the meta car. It's not the car which does it, it's them driving better than you do. Now, if you're messing around in the city, what can beat these things, right? Or what keeps up with them at least, or whatever. Usually you're ahead of them. There are quite some options though. Audi RS6. Get some settings on it, because I see a lot of people sliding around with this thing. It's pretty good. It's a bit stiff, of course. It's an estate, what you expect. It's a bit stiff, but other than that, 393 kilometers an hour. It's 7 kilometers more than that Porsche and that Ferrari, for instance. Definitely usable. Corvette ZR1 on some tracks is actually better than the F40 and the 911 GT. Definitely usable. BMW M8 Performance Edition. Pretty damn good. Strong NOS, especially in acceleration NOS. Pretty similar to that Porsche, if not better. It has the same top speed as the Audi RS6, 393 kilometers an hour, which again is 7 kilometers more than the F40 and the 911 GT. Black Panther Edition does even 395, I think. So this is the second highest top speed next to the Hurricane. But overall it also handles in corners pretty well. Definitely usable as well. The same, I don't know exactly for the normal GTR Nismo. So I'm gonna point you to be sure, to the Haru Edition. Because that one does exactly the same as the BMW and the Audi RS6. 393 kilometers an hour. Definitely usable. The Corvette Stingray C8, either if you take the normal one, very strong NOS, good handling, decent top speed. This is more in the F40 category, also one of these that you can beat the F40 with. Either the normal one or the police version, just fine. Definitely usable. Even the Diablo GT, pretty good. Viper also keeps up with it, pretty decent speed. This thing definitely keeps up with these guys. Also does 380 plus. This is one of those again we can beat the F40s with on certain tracks. Handles pretty okay. This is the Liberty Walk edition. There's also a normal M4 which I think has the same top speed, but this one has a body kit, so a bit better handling probably. I'm usually using this one. I haven't used much of the normal one yet. So yeah, again we are ending up here already. What did I show you now already? Let's have a look. Let's just go all the way to the top and actually count them in this, because there are 193 cars in this at the moment. More to come. Hurricane on highways, other than that, I wouldn't overuse it. Audi RS6 is definitely an option. The ZR1, so that's 3. The Porsche, if you really have to, wouldn't bother with it. The M8 Performance Edition, definitely. F40, certain tracks maybe, but it's don't overuse it. There are other options. That's my point. You can drive the F40, but don't drive this all day long in every Street Tier 2 lobby. This is, don't you guys find that boring when you have 193 cars? And it's not that you're gonna be faster with it than with any of the other cars. Like on a city track, that M8 beats that thing, or at least keeps up with it. Black Panther on something with a bit more higher speed. The F40s and the 911s cannot follow it. So yeah, definitely. The GTR Nismo probably is good, seeing the Haru edition is actually up there with the Audi RS6 and the BMW M8 Performance. So definitely options. 4GT also not that bad in 3 Tier 2. Definitely works. Aston Martin, DBS. It's a bit slow acceleration, but it keeps up. If there's some people of those F40 overusers, if they mess up like one time, it's bye-bye. Yeah? You win that thing. Yeah? So it's definitely usable on certain tracks. Yeah, any Corvette C8 Stingray, whether it's this Donut Media thing, the police car, or the normal one, definitely usable. Diablo GT is pretty okay as well, especially if you drive manual. BMW M4, yes, works. TBR Griffith, if you have some decent tuning on it, yes, it works. It's a bit slow in general, but it corners well, it grips good. It's good gutter corner, this one. I'll probably find some other vehicles. Already, well, oh, this one here also pretty okay. If you don't have it one, it comes in, when is it? August, I think, 14th or 7th, I'm not exactly sure. You had that Jaguar bundle, the 3 cars which were available in the Crew 2. We already transferred them as the Crew 2 players. But they are coming to the shop, that Jaguar bundle with the 3 Jaguars. I think August 14, if I'm not mistaken. The same goes for the Maserati bundle with the Ghibli and the Levante. We already have it in the garage, but... this one, I haven't used it myself, but I saw many people using it, driving in the top 3, so I'm assuming it's also pretty good. This one had a little bit less top speed than the Black Panther, I think, but it grips pretty good, so also definitely usable in Street Tier 1. And when I say usable, then you're in the top 5 if you use that thing on certain tracks. Even the Toyota Super Liberty Walk is also fine. You can use the BMW. You can both of these Liberty Walk editions are definitely usable. And probably something else that we... Oh, the other day we drove one of the Mazda RX-8s. Also fine. Porsche Cayman GT4 was sort of... What was it? The Crew 2? That thing was like for a long time pretty good till some of the Mercedes came along, but still pretty okay. We haven't used the Porsche Turbo yet, so I can't... Might be good. We were in the top 5 the other day with the Lamborghini Urus. So the SUVs actually work in some circumstances. Oh, this thing here. We won a lobby the other day with it, and then a 3rd place after that as well. So the Hoonigan Audi definitely also usable in Grand Race. Alfa Romeo GTA definitely usable in Grand Race. Lotus Evora GTA Overcut, definitely. These are all cars you can get onto the top 5 and top 3 situations with these things in Street Tier 2. Point being, again, stop overusing the F40 and the 911, there are other options available. Even this thing. Pretty good, eh? Pretty good in Street Tier 2, eh? The 512 Testarossa. Pretty good. You can use any of the Hondas, either the Kameya Header edition or the normal one, or the Red Panther edition. Also pretty okay. If you drive manual, definitely the Countach is an option, because it has that slow granny shifting thing. Was like the OP car at some point in the Crew 2 in PvP. The Spiker maybe was pretty good in the Crew 2, but was one of those cars that I used to beat the meta cars. But it's sliding and understeering a little bit. I still need to tune the bunch of these street cars, so might have a look at it, and then it might be usable as well. At the moment, we're sliding a little bit, understeering a bit too much with it. Oh, this thing here. Most fun car in the game. We won the Street Tier 2, I think it was like the middle part of the race. We switched to this thing, we were in 4th or 5th place, we drove to the 1st place. You throw this thing in corners and you go onto the power throttle, power drifting through the corner. You actually have grip and pulls you out of that corner. While the other guys are sliding a little bit away, because not every car steers every great in Street Tier 2. They might have the speed and the acceleration but doesn't steer. This thing doesn't need to steer, just throw it in a corner. Drive it like a go-kart. Most fun you will ever have, and it's pretty good. Never see it like, of course, if you do time attacks with yellow parts where you're pushing it and where you fine driving every inch of the track in a playlist event or a summit event, I don't know, might not do that well. But in Grand Race, you can win the Street Tier 2 section with this thing. Most fun car you will ever drive, if you would try it, but no, always in that F40 out you, don't you? Also here, this one, Hoonigan Porsche. Both of the Scotto's car, the Porsche and the Audi, are pretty okay to drive in Street Tier 2. So yeah, options here. Options in Street Tier 2. And something like the Hoonigan Audi is podium material. BMWs, all the ones that I mentioned, you can actually beat the F40s with in Street Tier 2. Again, 10-15 options that I gave you now, something like that. Stop overusing that 911 or that F40. It is getting ridiculous out there in Grand Race. Especially if you're like a random player, which, you know, one of those YouTuber metas, as I call them. Those are people that watch YouTube videos and then, oh, yo, this guy drives this thing, I'm gonna drive this, and they drive it the whole day long, but they don't have the skills to drive some of these cars. Stop overusing it, use something else. You might be surprised by some of these cars, which actually might drive better for you. That's the whole point of this, right? We did like 6-7 hour stream the other day. We drove everything from Alfa Romeo to Zenvo, and we did pretty well. We missed out on podium a couple of times, but not that many. What have we done? Racing is the next category. Same story here. Stop, please, for the God's sake. Stop overusing this thing. Especially if you're new to the game or you're one of those guys that watch a YouTube video, don't drive this thing. First, get familiar with the physics of the game and whatnot, because this thing is actually a little bit tricky to drive. And the reason for that is it has pretty damn good grip, which you would think makes it easy to drive, but now with the Season 4, where they made some changes on the physics and gave, in general, all cars a little bit more grip, this thing actually has too much grip, and that makes it tricky because it sometimes snaps on you, because you turn it into a corner and then it grips too much. Actually, you want it actually a little bit less grip. Is it good? Yes, it is good. It does 434 kilometers an hour, but there are many cars which can do 434 kilometers an hour in racing. Let's first start with the Highway King, of course. This thing is 441 kilometers an hour. It's also the only car in racing with four-wheel drive, if I'm not mistaken. Unless they added a few, but in the Crew 2 this was the only one with four-wheel drive, which made it already completely OP. On top of that, they gave it the highest top speed. 440 kilometers an hour plus. So anything with highways, this is your way, because all the others are limiting out at 433, 434, something like that. And when I say all the others, I mean all the others. There are other cars in this discipline than Gordon Murray's. And there are cars which keep up with this thing, which beat this thing. Stop overusing this thing. It's especially in racing with the T50s and rally raid with the Z4s. You see so many people using these things and it's not necessary. If you want to use them, be my guest, but don't use them every lobby. There are options. Camaro is one of them. Keeps up with it, beats it. Depends a bit on the lobby, it depends a bit on your driving skill, it depends a bit on the track that you know, but this thing is a corner machine. It has acceleration, it has top speed, it has everything, it keeps up, and very often, and it doesn't do funny stuff. This is probably from, let's say from the 434 vehicles, which can do 434, and there are a bunch of them. This is probably the one that handles the easiest. If you're a new driver, I would go for this one to begin with, before you start messing around with anything else. This thing, sure, fine, use it, but this thing keeps up with it. This thing keeps up with it. KTM X-Bow GG2, pretty good as well. The Ferrari 458, pretty grippy, pretty handling, twisty corners, keeps up with that, and acceleration wise, especially, I think, let me see, do I have the gearbox on -2? No, I don't actually. So it's actually faster coming out of the acceleration than that Gordon Murray. Because I overtook a few, like coming out of a corner, had more speed coming out of a corner than the Gordon Murrays. Might be different if you drive that thing manually, obviously, because, you know, manual clutch, bullshit, macro. Then any car works. But it works, This 458 is decent enough. Vulcan you can use on some tracks for sure. This thing is actually 1 kilometer an hour more top speed than the Gordons and the Camaros and whatnot. So this thing definitely a option. The Gallardo mainly on top speed, that's where it exceeds. It's a bit stiff on some twisty tracks, but other than that, again now with the Season 4 more grip in general, it can be used on other tracks as well, but it's mainly the Highway King. Other than that, there are other options. Bugatti Bolide, sure, works as well. Ferrari FX6K, sure, works as well. Koenigsegg CCGT, sure. They're all potential top 3 candidates. So there are all vehicles that you can definitely use. The Lamborghini Essenza and the Hurricane can also do 433, so they can also be used. Murcielago, also decent handling. I didn't even test this one recently, but might also be one of those. This thing, yeah, I'm not a fan of electric cars, so you will not see me use those very often. But it is usable. If you really want to talk about electric cars, then I would say go with this one, because this is actually pretty damn good. Has decent top speed. That's what acceleration, but I'm not a fan of these one gear wonders where, especially on an automatic gearbox, I don't know what it is. It's strange, right? It only has one gear, so it has nothing to do with manual shifting or whatnot. But I always find like they go lower in RPM or something like that when you drive them automatic than when manual. But yeah, if I drive them on manual, for instance when I'm on the wheel, obviously I'm using my manual shifters. Then I have a problem with this car because you approach a corner, you're so used to braking and shift down then, then you're in neutral. Because the thing only has one gear, it's on drive, and if you downshift it goes to neutral. So how many times I've driven electric cars with the wheel in the beginning when we were playing the game, I have no idea. How many times I were in neutral every time downshifting. But in general I don't like electric cars. If I can avoid it I will not drive them. Hurricane the same as the Essenza. Also can be used. They are the same top speed as the Camaro and the Gordon Murrays and whatnot. Corvette C8, pretty decent. You keep up with the Gordon Murrays and the Camaros. So that means, yeah, they all have the same speed, which means you're battling it out with these guys. Huh? Acceleration wise it's also fine. Let's see what else. Oh, this thing here, another one of those. Pretty damn good. Decent brakes, good steering, good handling. In general, it's pretty okay. I don't know about the top speed, I haven't tested this one yet, but what it actually does in top speed. 488 GT3, pretty grippy, pretty good handling. But it lacks a little bit of top speed, so the 458 GT2 is a better version. But you can use this on certain tracks where the top speed doesn't matter that much. You can use this thing, it's pretty good. McLaren 12C, also not that bad, definitely usable. The GT3 Nismo, definitely usable. I haven't tested the Mercedes properly, but it's probably an option as well. Here, another one in the category. All have the same top speed. Camaro, BMW M6. We did several podiums with it last weekend in Grand Race, so it's definitely usable. You get the idea. I don't know how many we have 88 cars at the moment, I think, in racing. I think I already mentioned 15 or now, those are things that actually. Oh, here, this one, another one. Nissan Skyline, pretty grippy. This one might lack a bit of top speed, but. This was already something we were using in the Crew 1 as being a good car. It is still good. So yeah, you get the idea. And then we probably missed a few which I didn't even drive yet, like the new Alfa Romeos and so that came in. Like I remember the Crew 1, the Alfa Romeo 8C competition was pretty good. So it's probably still good in Grand Race. This thing I haven't tested it. I think this was a bit stiff, I think. If I remember correctly, but we'll see. I drove this the other day, works fine. We finished in third with it, which means it works fine. If I think about it, I might test the 8C later on. I'll do some Grand Race after this. When I recorded this video, I will do some Grand Race on Twitch probably. So we will test it out if there is racing. Now we know. There are some other options probably. But I'm not going to mention them because I haven't used them. I tested this because this thing was a bit broken in the Crew 2, doing 460 km/h top speed, but that's no longer the case. I tested the top speed of these vehicles the other day. I also need to test this one, because that was also pretty good at some point in time in the Crew franchise, so we still need to test this one. This thing had good brakes, it had good turn-ins, although you would think like, oh, it's a bit of a concept hot rod. You would think that it would be actually stiff, but it actually turned in pretty good. So yeah, the Alfa Romeo 8C might be an option and the Proto Hub 1 might be an option. Other than that, I already mentioned here 15 cars where we regularly get the podium with. Stop overusing this thing, please. Really. You, all your racers out there, stop doing it. Okay, which leaves us with a let's see, 2 more events, I guess, or 2 more disciplines, categories, whatever you want to call it. Let's start with this one, because this is pretty simple. Most of them have the same top speed, doing around 414, 415 kilometers an hour, so in theory you could use any of the Alpha GPs. What I would not use is this thing, for the simple reason, that's the only one it doesn't have that top speed. It limits out at 407 kilometers an hour. But it has the highest acceleration speed, surprisingly. If you would like just go fast travel to the airport speed trap or something, and you just go full throttle and whatever the camera tells you there, so let's say the first 3-4 gears, this thing does 321 kilometers an hour on that speed trap, which is a bit more than the 316 for the Red Bull RB18. That's like probably your best shot acceleration wise for Grand Race. It is a bit long and stiff, it's not, but it's drivable. Huh? You can get somewhere up there in Grand Race. The KTMs, they're pretty okay. They only have one problem on automatic gearbox. The brakes are not that great. And cars which do not have good brakes are in general not great on automatic gearbox. Which means you can't downshift whenever you want, obviously, on automatic. And so yeah, that's why the KTMs, you will not see me use those too much. They are good grip and good cornering, but the brakes, the slowdown is not great enough. The Proto Alpha Mark G4 Explorer Edition. The Mark 10, that is. This thing is just like the normal one. A pretty grippy machine. Only this thing is there are only 1,000 or so in the game. You could register for it on the website. 960 were given out to people living in Belgium, France and Switzerland. It was some sort of promotional thing with GP Explorer. And if you lived in one of those 3 countries, you could register for it. And then they selected some people and get that car. I believe 960 and then 40 were given away to content creators, which makes a total of 1,000 cars of 250,000 people playing out there. So it's a pretty unique car in a way. But surprisingly, they gave it 3 kilometers an hour less top speed than the normal one. They probably did that to be sure that they would not make this thing OP or something like that. Because otherwise you would have the community explode, because there are only a certain number of people who have it. Which is like 0.5% of the community. So yeah, it's a pretty rare car, but other than that, you can use the normal Mark 10. Why do I say that? Because these things are the corner machines. They are grippy as hell. They probably take from all the Alpha GPs, the Mark 10s are the best cornering machine. They also have the best brakes. And top speed wise, they are doing similar as the rest. Overall, people always say it's the RB14 Disruption Edition or the normal RB14. Definitely, if you do a time attack, the Disruption Edition is like 1 or 2 tenths faster than this thing. So the OP car, no. If Summit yellow set, yeah, probably this thing. But in general, in Grand Race, whatever you want to use. I use the Alpha Mark 10, I use the Ivory Tower from time to time, I use the Disruption. I don't know, I don't like the Mark 2 anymore for some reason. There's something with the handling, but other than that, you can use it. It's a bit stiffer or so that it handles. Messed around a bit with the settings. I think this is one of those things which doesn't benefit from the fact that they changed cars being too grippy in this season 4. And it's fine for some cars, but in some cases it makes them too grippy, like the Gordon Murray and also this Alpha Mark II. I find it's like, I don't know, something strange with it. I don't use it that often. The RB18 also fine. So you have the 14 and the 18, they are pretty close to each other. Also in time attacks with the yellow set, it works. They're pretty close to each other. This thing understeers a little bit, and the brakes are not that great. KTM's, as I mentioned, are also not great on brakes, so I don't use it that much. This thing, pretty good. Works fine in Grand Race. RB13 is a little bit slow, but you can use it for sure, no problem. This is something, I don't know, I don't like it very much. The Pulse Performance is probably the only one that you will not see me use in a Grand Race very often. I don't know, I don't like the handling on it for some reason. This thing is definitely something that I use a lot in Grand Race. Because yeah, there are quite some lobbies in Season 4 with Alpha GP, so we are using these often and I like to switch it up. So yeah, you will mostly see me drive the Sparrow edition or the Mark 10 Explorer edition or one of the Red Bulls or even the Ivory Tower. It's all available. So yeah, this is a quick discipline because you can use pretty much any of them. Except for I would avoid the KTM because of the brakes. But if you drive manual, maybe they work for you. I don't know. Manual clutch, that is. Which leaves us with the Hypercars. Again. Please stop overusing the Centojetti. Please, for the sake of it. It's grippy and it handles, it's the easiest to drive of the Hypercars, I guess. But is it the best? No. All the Bugattis limit out at 493 kilometers an hour. Every single one of them. Whether it's the Centojetti, the Devo, the Chiron, all the Chirons, all the Veyrons, it's all 493 kilometers an hour. And some of them are too heavy, so acceleration wise probably the Centojetti is a better Bugatti. Divine Edition is also fine. Can it be beaten? Yes, by many cars it can be beaten. This is another one which is overused. Rally 8, BMW Z4, Racing, Gordon Murray, Hypercar, Centojetti. Stop overusing them, especially if you are one of those people which I very often see fly out of the corners with Centojetti, because the brakes, for instance, are not that good on this thing. Of course, not a problem if you're one of those manual clutch guys, but we're using it from time to time. But it is, in general, it's the easiest to drive of the Hypercars. But from time to time, I use it. Not very often, though. Not very often. This is, for instance, a car that can easily beat it because it's faster. The Koenigsegg Just Go. Has faster acceleration. The problem that you have here with automatic gearbox, this thing has 9 gears. Bit of a problem. Very often you're stuck in 8. Takes a long time before it eventually goes to 9. So you're gonna have to use more boosts, which means you have less boost available. If it matters at the end, maybe. But we have several lobbies with this car. It is pretty damn good. This thing lacks a bit of top speed. Limits out at 478 kilometers an hour is a general thing. The Koenigsegg is 480 something. The Bugattis is 490 something. This is also Pagani's 480, or in this case 478 it limits out. But it handles good, it has good brakes, it corners good, so on certain tracks it is definitely usable. I would stay away from it with the highway, but I would stay away with anything I just mentioned for the highway anyway. Because the 480 and the 490 cars are not cutting it. If you want a highway, you need to go 500 plus. And there are not many cars that can do that. The Ferrari Enzo limits out at 502, 503 is definitely an option for highway tracks. And you can slipstream together with the Noble M500, which is another one which goes over 500 kilometers an hour. Is there anything going faster? Yes, there is. The Ferrari F12 TDF can do 508 or 509. So if there are a couple of those around, they will get away from you. But not that far away from you that a Noble or a Enzo cannot follow. All the Bugattis and the Koenigseggs far behind you because they are doing 10 kilometers or more less top speed. So highway, it's one of those, I would say. There might be another one which does 500 plus, which I haven't tested yet, but I don't think so. As far as I know. The Noble, it's okay, you can use it whatever. This thing is a bit more playful, but that's probably why I prefer it over the Noble, but we've used it. We use the Noble, we use the Enzo but this thing does a few kilometers an hour more. So this is like the highway king, I guess, if you can call it that. Overall, in general, good speed, decent top speed, not the highest. This is a 480 plus car, but not a 490 or a 500. So, but overall, handling brakes, turning radius, and all that kind of stuff, this is probably the best hypercar at this moment in Season 4. But there are some other options, as mentioned. This thing, don't see it much, but pretty good though. Coming close to the Agera. Keeps up with it. The Lycan Hypersports. Definitely an option. So yeah, all that I mentioned here, definitely usable. Cento Jetchi, you can use it if you can drive it. If you're not, you need to be a bit careful with the brakes. You need to be braking a little bit early or downshift a little bit early if you're driving manual, compared to other cars, because it doesn't slow down that great. But other than that, it's pretty damn good. Handling wise, the easiest to drive probably. This is a bit more of a handful. This can snap on you if you're not careful, but it's fast. Fast acceleration. Can beat the Cento Jetchis. It has more nitro power. More acceleration in general, I think. So if you're one of those guys which is all over the place with the Cento Jetchi, then you're probably going to be even more over the place with this thing, because this is a bit more playful. But I don't mind that much the playful car, so I'm using it quite often. Ferrari on the highway. This is usually my highway machine, if a highway track is available. I'm not such a fan of the M500. I don't know what it is. It's just, I don't know. It's a bit stiff handling or so, I don't know. Makes it easier. This is a bit more looser and easier to take the corners with, and they pretty much do the same speed, but the Ferrari F12 exceeds them with a few kilometers an hour. Although a bit harder to drive, I'm assuming, because you don't see that many of them. But yeah, some people are just using Cento Jetchi all day long. The other day I was in an Enzo, some other guy was in a Noble. We used that, we switched to 3 Tier 2, we both used the M8 Performance Edition, BMW. And then we switched to Rally Rate, and I think I was in the Porsche, he was in the Nissan or whatever. We finished 14 seconds ahead, most of the time mate on the highway. The lobby after that, we finished 17 seconds ahead. So people always in the Bugattis and the Koenigseggs, they're not keeping up with these 500 cars on the highway. So that's a wrong choice over there. It's as simple as that. But other than that, all usable. Everything you see here. Cento Jetchi, Jesco, Enzo mainly on the highway. Pagani overall. Tracks you can use it. The Noble you can also use overall. Pretty good cornering as well. But it's mainly highway. This is also mainly highway. This one, I think this season it is actually not that far off the Agera. You don't see many people using it, but it's definitely usable. And it follows the Ageras. So yep. So yeah, Agera, Lycan are usable. Bugattis, yeah, whatever you want. Divine Edition is definitely something you can use on certain tracks, which means that also the other 300 plus and whatnot you can use. The 1-to-1 is also an option. The Agera is a little bit better, but it just works as well. Huh? The Agera is a bit tricky, but now that they gave it some more grip, that's why they made it like the best season car at the moment, I think. Because it was a bit tricky to drive, the Agera. The same goes with the 1-to-1. It could surprise you sometimes and it'll snap a little bit on you. But now that they made all these cars a little bit more grippy in general in the whole game, the Agera, for instance, is one of those which benefits from it, which probably makes it the best car in Season 4 in Hypercar. Yeah, also here, I'm not a fan of these one gear wonders. Regera, Gemera is another one, only one gear. Hybrid, electric, hydrogen, I am not a fan of it. Talking about hydrogen, we'll probably come by that. So yeah, it goes for all these Bugattis. You can use them, but one is better than the other. From all the Bugattis, probably the Cento Jetchi is the best, but there are many cars which can play around with that. This thing, for sure. The Agera and the 1-to-1 is probably a little bit better, but this thing is not that far behind. A little bit slow acceleration, I think it was. But other than that, this one recently added. Automatic gearbox, it does weird stuff. Accelerates pretty good in first and second gear, but it also has a third gear. Completely dies out. It shifts from second to third gear and it drops to 2000 RPM and it has no more acceleration in third gear. So you're gonna have to boost there. It has strong boost, but then it limits out at 473 kilometers an hour, which is just not good enough. It is just not good enough in Hypercar. This is not even mid-tier, I think. It is. It has the acceleration, and some people who are hyped about anything which is not a combustion engine, they're hyped about it again. But no, this thing is not good at all in Hypercar. Gordon Murray is pretty good. Also here, you have the same problem as with the racing one. It's a bit too grippy sometimes, which makes it's a bit tricky to drive, but it's pretty fast though. So this is also one in the top 5 this season, I think, for sure. So yeah, you can definitely use this and do well with it. I haven't used that lately, but don't know how it's doing. Was pretty good in Crew 1 performance spec because of high speed thing. So this might be another one. I haven't tested it yet. This might actually be another one which goes towards the 500, but I don't know. I think they tuned it down if I'm not mistaken. Let's see, Lamborghini Veneno, pretty good as well. It's not is the best from the Lamborghinis? No, probably not. Crew 2, it probably was one of the better ones from the Lamborghinis. So yeah, you should be able to use this in a grand race as well and do pretty okay with it. I used it the other day, but I still have to do the Hypercar testing, and so this thing is not tuned, so it understeers a bit. But other than that, we can probably use that once we have tuned it a little bit. The Zenvo for sure. I see that one coming up. Noble M600 is a bit too slow. The M500 is better for highways especially. I haven't driven this thing here, but I'm assuming it's the same as this one, and this one is also up there. Pretty good handling, turning, braking. Likes a bit of top speed, so don't use it on the highway, but in general it's pretty good. Then we come to the Ferraris. They are a bit more trickier. They are rear wheel drive, a lot of grand races in the rain, so you're fighting a little bit with this thing. And the same with the SF90, but both of them are pretty good. You can get podiums with them in Hypercar. But you need to be a bit gentle on the throttle, obviously. Especially if the roads are wet, coming out of corners, because otherwise you might be sideways. But if you're a bit gentle on the throttle coming out of a corner, they are definitely drivable in grand race. And do well with them, that is. Also here, Lamborghini Countach, pretty good. This is a corner machine, a grip machine. Brakes are good, handling is good. Lacks a little bit of top speed, like most of the Bugattis, but compare, for instance, for the highway track, so I wouldn't use them there. But anything with corners, definitely can use this in Hypercar Grand Race. You will do pretty well with it. Probably top 5, I feel. Personally, handling wise, it's probably top 5 for the Hypercars. And it's a little bit, because of the body kit, a little bit more grippy than the normal one. So if you have to use one, and I would use this one if you have it. I do believe it's a Summit or Motorfest from the Crew 2. I don't know if it's available in the shop here in this. I don't know. There's nothing in the shop available for me, so I don't know. Some of them they brought in the shop or dropped them in the main stage here or there. But I don't know what exactly. I didn't keep a list of what is now of these Summit cars from the Crew 2 already in the shop here. From time to time they're bringing 1 or 2 in case you're not the Crew player, then otherwise you can't get your hands on it. So step by step they're bringing them one by one into this game so that other people, new players, can also buy them. Although they are called exclusive to Crew 2, there is no such thing as exclusive in the Crew franchise. At some point or another it will become available. We have learned that over the years. Let's see. This thing also pretty corner grippy. So also 720. Also this one. I think this one was a Motorpass. I think Motorpass or Summit as well from the Crew 2. Also here, because of the body kit, pretty grippy, pretty good, usable. They're a bit more of a fight, the Ford 88 Pista. Yeah, there are other options. This thing, pretty decent speed if I remember correctly. It's a bit of a tricky car to drive, but it has definitely some speed. This thing, good acceleration, but yeah, this one doesn't have that much speed. That's the problem. Otherwise, you potentially could be using it, but again, electric, hybrid stuff. From the two new cars that they brought in with Elite Bundle 3, this is the best. That Hyperion thing is not that great. This thing lacks a bit of top speed, unfortunately. But it has decent handling. Brakes are pretty okay. You have to mess a lot with the settings though. I'm still messing with it because no matter what you do, it keeps understeering. It is pretty understeering. The Nissan GT-R 50 by Ital Design. Combination Ital Design has one of those design things in combination with Nissan, some sort of cooperation between the two, and that resulted into the Nissan GT-R 50. Sort of like you have, what is the Aston Martin, what's it called again? Also by one of those, Zagato, by Zagato. That's sort of similar thing. Italian designer thing in combination with the brand itself, and then they come up with some special concept car or whatever. This is GT-R 50, 50 years of GT-R, I think it is, that they're celebrating with this car. The Reventon I haven't used in this game yet, but it might probably be good. Oh, here another one. Definitely top 5 material in Hypercar if you drive in Grand Race. Again, depends a bit who's in your lobby and all that stuff, but I get it. But this thing has speed, it has brakes, it has turning radius, which is good enough to keep up with some of these guys. If you have 10 sweaties within a gear in your lobby, then you will be 11th. It's as simple as that. But if you only have 1 or 2 of those, you will be able to keep up with them and maybe even beat one of those if they make a mistake here or there, you know. It's one of those cars, they will not drive away from you that far, let's put it that way. And that already makes them good enough. This thing I see from time to time, I see people use this. I haven't used it myself, as you can see, there's nothing, not even an underglow on it or something. I'm not into vanity much, but I usually put some underglow on my car, then I know that I'm done with this car, right? I've put whatever I can customize it, I put some tuning on it, and then the underglow tells me like, okay, this car is done. This thing doesn't have anything, which also tells me that I haven't driven it yet properly. But I see some people use it, so I'm thinking it's pretty okay in Hypercar. This thing, unfortunately, is a manual car, I think. It's pretty good. I drove it several times, we finished 3rd and 4th with it a couple of times, and that's where we usually end up. Because it doesn't brake enough in automatic. It's a corner gutter grip machine, for sure. If you hit the gutter, that thing stays in there, it takes the corner, you come out of there pretty easy. It's great. It's great in cornering. Bit slow acceleration, but definitely the problem is very often you miss the gutter because it doesn't slow down enough. Because the brakes are not good enough. And that might be a problem which you obviously will not have if you drive it manual. But I have used it a few times and I like it in a way, but at the same time that braking is starting to bothering me. But it's definitely, but also here it has, as you can see, it has a wide body kit. Put that thing on, which makes it way less bouncier and it will give you more stable grip overall. Pretty good, especially if you drive manual. Season 4, this is one of them. You can definitely use it. But yeah, also here, I don't know, how many did we see here now? 20 cars that I mentioned where you can be on the podium with in a grand race. But what are they using? This thing. Every average Joe out there, every Sunday afternoon kid or whatever, is driving Cento Jetchis. You see the missed corners because, as I said, the brakes are not that good on this thing. But this one has good enough brakes to stop it and to turn it and twist it. It's easier to drive than the Jaguar, for instance. But it all works. Everything you see here, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, And then a bunch of that we went over there a bit later, which I don't have parts on, so they put them somewhere wherever the level is, but don't have that many parts. I'm only working with 6-7 parts sets in my game, and I always switch them, and all the rest goes out. Like now I see I have some yellow dots here, which means there are still parts sitting in here. We did a few lobbies yesterday and I probably did not remove any of them. Street is nothing. Okay. We did some drift. Nope. Racing. Nope. Dragster. Hypercar. Okay. It was getting a bit late yesterday when I did Grand Race, and the lobbies were not filling up anymore. It was like 3-4 in the morning, and which normally in the weekend no problem, but it was like, I think it was Thursday or so, and the lobbies were getting like 18-20 people. And so in that case I am switching to I'm Europe, obviously, over here, seeing Belgium. And normally I play on Europe servers. Oh, we have a set on there sitting for some reason. But if the lobbies are going like 18-20 and they are hardly filling up, which is not often the case, but on Tuesdays evenings and Thursday evenings you can sometimes have it. Then I'd switch to US East servers. But that is, I don't like to do it too much because you have that desync thing, right? Which is always a bit annoying. What do I mean by that is like, you might, if you play on the US, then you might have 100 ping and then you start like 1 second later or something at the start. And that means that it will be calculated on the finish, that 1 second that you start later. So if you then finish, like there's a guy in first place and you drive in second place, and you cross the finish line like that, you will get a win. Because it will calculate that 1 or 2 seconds that you start later at the start, and it will calculate it and then put into a measurement, let's say, at the finish. And so if you just finish right behind the guy, then there will be that difference will be calculated, and it will say like, hey, you won the race. But on his screen he finished first, and even on your screen you finish second, but you still get the win because of the calculation of the 2 seconds from the start, which is always a bit weird looking, if you know what I mean. And I think it was a rally with Alpha GP and Rally Raid or something that we played there. We played a couple of lobbies, but the lobbies were filling up there, but nothing too major. That's the other problem that I have with Grand Race, all these stupid parts. It's just ridiculous. Mentioned it several times. Just give us a shop. Mr. Fergus, if you're still around, or whoever is in charge. I'm assuming he's still around. He's the CEO of the game, of the company. If he would not be around, then he sold the company probably. Oh, Rally we also did. So yeah, Alpha GP, Rally Raid or so, the lobby probably was. I did 3-4 races on the US servers and then eventually went to bed. That's where those few parts are still sitting here from, because normally I clean out every time. Play for a few hours, clean out, play for more few hours, and then clean out all that crap again. I don't want parts sitting in here. That is another reason how you get all these parts, right? And then you don't have any problems with any of that stuff. What do I mean by that is you have the parts and then you re-roll them, and then people, I see sometimes on streams or whatever, I see people that have to buy these scrap parts. Then I think like, just scrap your parts, you know what I mean? That's where these 5 million are coming from, just from deleting all these parts that you have sitting in here which you do not use. Just delete them, and then you will have enough of that thing whenever you have to re-roll some yellow sets, that you have enough of those things to re-roll. Because they're not cheap, they're like, what is it? 1.4 million you have to pay for it, I think. for the highest one. Yeah, like 1.4 million for 170 of those things. And they go pretty quickly, right? So it's like, once you start re-rolling, sometimes you need 60, 70 rolls before you get what you need. So my advice would be delete always these parts, and always when you do that, also go into the driver menu and check your mailbox in case there are some extra parts in there. There we go. Because that's sort of how that works. You have these sets in here, and then you go in here, and then you have like, I don't know what it is, 10 or 15 extra parts sitting in here, potentially, if you would stock up on them. And if this thing is full, like if the brakes is full, and you still win brakes, then it's gonna start sending them to the mailbox. Where there is room for 64. Strange number in a way, on another way also not, because it's a binary number. Computers, you know, binary system. It's like 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128 and so on. So 64 is, for that reason, it's a computer number, let's say. And that will be sort of it, I think. Did we miss anything? I don't think. So let me have a look. 1, 2, 3, drift, racing, dragster. We did all that in the beginning. Nope, we didn't do. So I showed you a bunch of cars, which can definitely get you a top 5, and most of them can get you a podium in Grand Race. So the so-called Grand Meta Guide videos out there, just stop doing them, people. Just stop doing them. Just make a short video every season to tell you what the super best car is or whatever, and that's fine for time attacks or whatever in the summit. But in a Grand Race, there are no such things as meta cars. There are only meta drivers. And that means that if you're not a good driver, you're in a Cento Jetchi, and you put some guy who can actually drive a car out there, and you put him in some sort of, I don't know what, average car, let's say, he's gonna beat you anyway. It's as simple as that. Especially if they have something decent, like any of these cars that we mentioned here, you can use in a Grand Race pretty easy. So it is a bit double. It's also how do they test them, right? I know somebody like, for instance, Militia Gaming. He tests them with some random yellow set, not with a nitrochemist set, but with some random yellow parts. But those parts can also have pure and whatnot on, and which gives you extra power on the NOS. So it's not a 100% proper test. If you really want to test cars for the Grand Race, you have to test them with a green set. A set of 7 green parts, and that is actually a Grand Race test then. And that's why you will never mention me this, because some cars are living from the nitro power. If you put a yellow nitro set on it with extra power on it, they're gonna even be stronger, and that's why you end up with some of these things. Which sort of brings us to this thing that I was telling you about earlier, right? Like the Peugeot, is it so OP in Grand Race? I don't find so. But it's living from a strong NOS. So if you test this thing, like I did here with a yellow nitrochemist set with pure and extra pump, yeah, then that thing smokes pretty much every of the other. But that doesn't make it OP in Grand Race or so. In certain tracks it will be, in other tracks it will not be. In other tracks the Maxi RX 5 might be better, or some other, even the Exige on some tracks, because the Exige also has strong NOS, even in Grand Race, although it's driving with green parts. Sometimes the rear-wheel drive cars, being the Exige, the Maxi 5, they are just better than the four-wheel drive Peugeot on some tracks. You have to throw it into corners. I find the Peugeot a bit stiff, for instance. So if you have a couple of these sharp hairpin uphill corners, some of the cars which you can throw around with strong NOS, like the Exige, give it a fight on the runny on that uphill section, for instance. So yeah, I'm still working on that. Yeah, what in the info thing, that's pretty much what we showed in the beginning of the video. That is all that thing with precise steering and ABS, where and traction control, and where I have that. And then other than that, we have been testing Alpha GP is done, Rally is done. With a note that if you drive it in manual, those blue cars that I have lighted in blue here probably will come up higher. Rally rate, we tested top speed already. So I know that the highest top speed is the Ducati Monster, followed by the Escalade and the Nomad. And then there are a few 276ers as well. There are also some which are doing 250 or 40. Like for instance the GMC Hummer. Has acceleration but has no top speed, so there's a problem. So would you use those things in Grand Race, for instance? Other than that, we still need to test them. So this is sort of what we're doing now. For one of the next days, probably, we will start doing the bigger ones. Motocross is done. As I said, it's a top speed thing in Grand Race. Monster truck. Silverado best with a yellow set. On a time attack, sure. But in Grand Race, can use anything from the top 5 here. Easy. Top 6 even. And even the Cherokee and the Hub 1 works on some tracks. All depends a bit on the lobby as such. I'm using very often the DeLorean just to fight the Silverados. And we have won several lobbies with a bunch of Silverados behind us. So it just depends. It really depends. The Dragster, yeah, there are some problems there. Not sure what the problem is with the Proto Hub 1. But on automatic gearbox, it's just not working. It is just not working. Although automatic, I mean, you put it in sequential, but you still play it with a key. I don't know. Is it something with the clutch? I don't know what it is. Every summit again, I see that thing show up there. I did a speed trap test. 3rd gear, 4th gear, 5th gear, and then boost. Whatever the camera told me, 633. I have all these in yellow highlighted are doing more speed than the Hub 1 on that same test. 3rd, 4th, 5th gear and boost. So it's gotta be something with the manual itself or the manual clutch combination, which gives this thing some sort of extra boost power that they do always use this thing in the summit for some reason. I don't know. Drag events, as you can see, it's on the bottom of the list here, and that is because it's the slowest of them all. It is the slowest of them all in a drag event itself. For me, in general, I've tested this on the airport thing where the Skyline was actually better than the Stingray, but only just like, yeah, what is it? It's like a few thousands here. But in general, for me on the keyboard, sequential gearbox, the Corvette Stingray is the best for drag events and also for the speed trap. But the manual guys are apparently using the Viper the last summit, so also there's something with the shifting clutch thing probably. Extra boost from the clutch or so, whatever. You know, Dragster are always a dangerous thing, especially after the clutch bug being around in the Crew 1. Might still be some sort of consequence of that. So those who are using it with clutch should test it manually without clutch and see if the Viper is still better than the Stingray. I don't think so. Seen on the sequential gearbox, the Stingray is faster than the Viper. There's not much difference in here. You can do a few runs where it might be the other way around, so they're very close, right? Skyline, Viper, Stingray are very close on some of these drag events. Well, I do say some, there are only 2, but you know, you get the point. Demolition Derby, yeah, I don't have the charcoal, but I know that the charcoal is in that charger area, or maybe even better. So the fenders are not that super over there. When it comes to time attacks, whether you want to use in Demolition Royale, the Bulk, the Frontiera, the Charger, it all works, I think, there. Powerboat, yep, overpowered Victor, so that's pretty simple for time attacks. The plane the same. The base top speed is what matters here, so then you end up with like a few which can do more than 300 kilometers an hour, not that many. So those are like the things you use in these events. But in that, because of this one being the highest, the Mustang, that's why you always see it. Plane events, people are always using Mustang, which is also the thing they will use in Grand Race. Nitro top speed doesn't matter that much. The highest is the Pilatus with 407, but that thing doesn't handle at all. If you start steering, that thing starts doing funny stuff on you and you don't know where you're going to end up. So I wouldn't use that thing. If you want to do skill tests, you're going to end up with the smaller planes, as I mentioned before. So yeah, we are still working on this thing. I will link it in the description if you want. You can keep an eye on what my results will be eventually. We still need to do a rally rate, which is 63 vehicles. We still need to do racing 88 at the moment. Hypercar 100 cars exactly at this moment, seeing they just added 2. It was 98, now we are at 100 hypercars. And then Street Tier 1 and Street Tier 2. So we still have to test the big ones. That's what we're going to do now. The upcoming weeks. To get this stuff running and get the whole document. And then whenever they add cars, we will obviously put them in there as well. The drift, I'm not sure what I'm going to do with that. As I said, in drift events you can get decent scores with any of these 38 vehicles in drift. Maybe I test them on a test track. Time attack. You know what that's going to do. Then you end up with the Grand Race guys. Like the Hoonigan is going to be the best then probably. Followed by Gera Murcielago over there. It's hard to test the drifts because whether you use them in a drift event, you can use all of them. You can get 800,000, a million points, whatever, with most of them. So it's a bit tricky to test them. And in Grand Race, that Hoonigan is so overpowered with green parts that it's, or with yellow parts, it will be overpowered. Has highest top speed, highest acceleration, and strong nuts. So we know what that's gonna do. You can test them all here. It's a bit tricky, I don't know. That's why I've sort of put it over there. Because in theory there are not that many vehicles, so we could have done this discipline already, but it's a bit hard to get a decent test with this. Seeing all of these cars will get you a decent drift score in drift events. And in time attacks you're gonna end up with those Grand Race vehicles. 3, 4 or 5 which you can actually use, and the rest will just be too slow. We'll see. We'll do something like that. Maybe I do both. Maybe I do a time attack and a drift event. Possible. We'll see. It's probably the last thing I will do, because not that important. If we use it in a summit, it's usually a drift event. Although in the Crew 2 they sometimes gave us like a time attack with that thing, but then everybody's going to use the Hoonigan Mustang in the summit, if that would ever be the case, if they bring that thing in. So yeah, we'll see. We're still working on this. I will put the link in the description so you can watch that if you need it. Obviously you cannot make any changes on it. It's all locked. Every page is locked, obviously. We learned that over time. Otherwise you have some people they send you mail like they ask access on it or something. And then half your document is changed after they get their hands on it. So obviously all these things are just there to view and use and to your own use. I'm not telling you that is the best car or whatever. I'm telling you this is the test that we did with a keyboard with automatic gearbox. Once I'm done with all that testing, I might throw in a few tests, maybe the top 10 of each discipline, and I will drive them with the wheel and see what that result of that is. Or those manual things where, which I highlighted in blue, which have slow shifting, they might actually be better. Well, I'm pretty sure they are better with manual shifting. Which would put some of these vehicles higher up in the ranking. That's why I also don't have them numbered from like, as you could see here. I always find it very tricky to do that. If you do like, let's say the rally, and you rank this like from 1 to 33. Oh, this is the first. That is all very debatable. That comes back to the beginning of this video. Meanwhile, a long video, but automatic gearbox, manual gearbox, manual plus clutch, different devices, keyboard, wheel, Xbox controller, PlayStation controller, all different devices. Direct mode on or off. Traction control, is it on comfort? Do you have it on sport? What's going on? All that kind of stuff. All these different settings in the menu, all these different driving style, different devices that you're driving with. And then you say like, hey, here are the tests of results, and you put it in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Not necessarily, because the number 1 for me, which is the Peugeot in a time attack, but in Grand Race, I don't like it that much, to be honest. I find it a bit stiff. Then I'd rather drive a Delta or an Exige or whatever in Grand Race. In a Summit, I know that we're gonna have to use a Peugeot then because it's the fastest, but you get the idea. If you're driving manual, the Peugeot might not be the fastest. Delta might be better, or at least come closer than what I do on an automatic gearbox. So there is difference of what you're driving, how you're doing it. So we just gave our results here. I have not numbered them from 1 to 10 or whatever. These are just, obviously we put the fastest time on top and then we go on from there. But my number 4 can be your number 6 or the other way around. You will have, in general, your top 10 will probably much, if you would do the test, look similar than mine because of speed or acceleration, that these things just have more than the other vehicles. It is what it is. But that doesn't mean that this is the OP car for Grand Race. Stop doing that, and stop, for the sake of us all, stop overusing them. More importantly, put some settings on your car. Pro settings. Also there, same story again, right? If you're on a keyboard, don't go to a guy on YouTube who is playing on a manual clutch controller thing. The settings will not work for you. That thing will understeer like crazy most of the time, or the other way around, right? I have some settings in here in these documents as well. You can use them if you want them, but they probably will not work on your controller. They probably will be too sensitive or too oversteering, because I need to give some more steering from my camera or anti-roll bars or whatnot to actually make that thing steer, because in general the keyboard doesn't steer as sharp as a controller, and then definitely with the direct mode it's even... If I turn my wheel, I'm getting 45 degrees angle. Guys with wheel mode, they're getting 60 degrees angle on that wheel, on that tire itself. You get the idea. But the point of it was, don't overuse, especially in racing rally raid. The Gordon Murrays, the Z4s, Monster Truck, the Silverados. Getting sick of seeing those things and then crashing and driving. I mean, it is not. There is no such thing as a meta car. There really isn't. You have meta drivers, you have meta settings, whatever, but there are no meta cars. It's as simple as that. You might have the fastest car around when you push it around on a time attack. That is something else. But that's necessarily the meta car. Maybe not for you, because maybe you cannot handle that specific car very well, and you might yourself be faster with another car. Then that car is your meta car. But overall, the top 10 in all these tests, whether I do it or somebody else does it, you have these overall, and you will have the same cars coming back in all of the top 10. Those are like just the fastest cars to drive. Whether you're a good driver, or medium driver, average driver, or super driver, it doesn't matter. But that's the same in Grand Race, right? So try to figure out what cars are working for you and then just drive those things, right? All the vehicles that I showed you are vehicles that I can get a top 3 with in Grand Race. And in some disciplines that were like 10, 15 cars, and then you go to Grand Race and you see all of you out there, or at least half the lobby, always driving that same bloody car. And you're not fast with it. So is it then the meta car? It's all open for debate. I'll leave it out there for you. The point is, there are more cars out there, 713 at this moment in the game, to use, except for those 5 or 10 which you are using every day for no reason. Do with it what you want with it. If you have the meta drivers up there, the so-called sweaties or whatever, and some of them are really good, it doesn't matter what you drive, you're going to lose anyway. So just drive a car which works for you, which handles okay, which brakes for you, which turns, which has decent speed, you can keep up with some of these guys. Then you have a good car in your hands. For yourself, for your driving style, for the way you play the game, and so on. It's not because some dude on YouTube tells you like, hey, use this car, and that everybody has to drive that all evening long. That is very often what's happening with, I think, at least 50% of these lobbies. Even in rally raid, you see them show up with a Z4. That thing is a bit bouncy and it can snap on you from time to time, but it's not a hard to drive car. But where some people with that end up with that Z4 in some of these rally raid events, then you think like, yeah mate, you shouldn't be driving that thing. It's like, it's the same with the Cento Jetchi, and it's the same with the Gordon Murray in racing. Have some fun, drive whatever you want, get better over time with them, get used to some of these cars, and then you have options to drive. And you will be in the top 5, you will be in the top 3 with some of these cars. Not with all of them, of course. Don't go into rally with the ice cream truck, because that's just a meme car. Just never touch that thing. Put it in your garage, register for a custom show or so, that's what it's made for. Customize it, put your own livery on it, put it on a custom show, you might get platinum with it, who knows, but don't drive that thing is slow as hell in general. Whether it's Grand Race or Summit, never ever use that. Unless the devs force us to use that car in the Triumph tank, then we have to, but... Other than that, that will be it for this one, guys. The point of the video was very simple. Don't overuse the so-called meta cars. Don't overdrive them. Just use whatever you like. There are several options available to get you on the podium in a grand race. No such thing as meta cars. There are only meta drivers. See you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.